Hey guys, as tonight we're going to slip through the carved wooden screens of Ottoman palaces, tiptoe past guards with curved swords, and duck into the soft candlelight of a place few dared to enter, the secret lives of lovers in the Ottoman Empire. You'll hear whispers behind velvet curtains, decode love letters written in spices, and maybe even smuggle a note in a piece of baklava. But full disclosure, you probably won't survive this. I mean, this is imperial treason we're talking about. If you get caught, yeah, not great for your neck. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. Istanbul? Are you out there? Midnight in Melbourne? I want to know. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You start in the hush of the harem, the infamous quarters of the Ottoman palace reserved for women, ruled not by the Sultan, but by hierarchy, influence, and invisible laws of survival. You're not a favourite concubine. Not yet. Just one of many. You arrived with a new name, traded your old one like a scarf at the door, and were told to smile, bathe, and keep your thoughts quiet, especially the dangerous ones, like love. The harem isn't chaos. It's a machine, elegant, silent, and always listening. Everything here has meaning. The colour of your robe, where you sit during dinner, who oils your hair? Behind the laughter and perfume, power shifts in whispers. You're watched, and you watch in return. And that's when it begins. The first time he looks at you, really looks, you're pouring water into a silver basin. He's not supposed to be there. A young court official passing through on some errand. His eyes flick toward yours in a way that's not protocol, not neutral. You look away too quickly, which is also suspicious. The second time, he leaves a fig on your tray. You don't eat it. You know what that could mean, but you place it beneath your pillow like a talisman. This is how it always begins in the palace, not with declarations, but with friction. Friction. Heat building under the rules. The most dangerous thing about love in the Ottoman palace wasn't just that it was forbidden, it was that it could shift the balance of power. A concubine pregnant by the wrong man could topple dynasties. A court official caught sneaking into the women's quarters could vanish overnight. Love wasn't just personal, it was political and deadly. But the more forbidden it is, the more urgent it feels. You begin speaking without words, a glance, a pause, a hand brushing the edge of a cushion, a slip of paper folded under a plate. The trick is not just hiding it from the guards, but from everyone else, because the real threat is often the girl sitting right next to you, combing your hair and reporting everything you say. You learn to speak in symbols. 1 cinnamon stick means, I miss you. 2 means, meet me. If the rosewater is sweet, the answer is yes. If it's bitter, stay away. Here's your historical fact for tonight. The Imperial Harem of the Ottoman Empire was more than a collection of concubines. It was a powerful institution, home to the Valide Sultan, the Sultan's mother, his sisters, daughters, and hundreds of women from across the empire. It had its own hierarchy, staff, and daily routines. And although locked away, it was deeply connected to the politics of the court. Women in the harem could make or break careers. They weren't just playing house, they were playing empire. Still, love happened. It always does. Some nights you sneak to the edge of the courtyard under the fig tree. You're not supposed to be there. But the night guards are often half asleep and the moonlight makes it easier to move without being seen. He leaves things for you. Little tokens, a piece of ribbon, a pressed violet, once a scrap of parchment with a poem in Persian. You hide these in your sleeves, between mattress layers, or sewn into the hem of your sash. Love doesn't need a room. It fits into folds. One night you find a letter written in oil and clove, invisible unless you hold it over a flame. The words appear slowly, like magic. You smile, but then you panic. You put it in your mouth and swallow it, just in case. And here's your quirky fact. Some Ottoman lovers really did use scented oils and spice blends to carry messages. Clove oil, for example, was used both for perfume and for secret writing. Combined with lemon or milk, it could darken under heat. The harem became a hub of creativity, not just embroidery and poetry, but espionage for the sake of desire. And then, of course, there's the open debate. Were these relationships really romantic, or were they mostly strategic? Did concubines fall in love with court officials, or was it survival masquerading as affection? Some scholars say these affairs were power plays in disguise. Others argue that within the cage, real hearts still beat. That even behind silk walls, people reached for each other, not just for escape, but for something real. You don't know yet which side you're on, but you do know this. You've started dreaming in poems. You wait for his notes like prayers, and when he finally brushes your wrist as he passes in the hallway, you feel it all the way down to your ribs. So yeah, love in the harem, it's a trap, but it's also a flame, and you're walking straight into it, barefoot, with your eyes open. You start to memorize the sounds of the harem, not just the rustle of silks or the splash of water in the marble fountains, but the particular footfalls of each eunuch, the muffled whispers through carved wooden lattice, and the tiny creaks of doors open just wide enough for a note to slip through. It becomes a second language, one of survival, but also anticipation, because now that it's started, now that his hand has brushed yours and left a heat that no bathwater can rinse away, every sound might be a signal, every silence might be a sign. By day, your life is all ceremony. You fold towels, arrange flowers, smile when asked. You answer to your given name, not the one you left behind. You wear scentless oils so no one can accuse you of trying to entice, but your mind is always elsewhere. You spend hours staring at garden walls, waiting for a shadow to fall just so, waiting for the curtain in the upper corridor to shift, waiting for him, because the palace harem is not just a prison, it's a game board. Every step, every glance, every word is a piece in motion. You've seen it before, the girl who grew too close to a nobleman and was suddenly reassigned to the laundry, never seen again. The kitchen boy who passed a note and was dragged out by the scruff of his neck, his sandals left behind like a warning. You know the rules, and now you're breaking them. One evening, while serving sherbet to the Valid Sultan's guests, you spot him again. He's at the far end of the corridor, bent over a scroll, pretending not to see you. But there it is, on the tray next to him, a cup of coffee with a single clove balanced on the saucer. Your pulse kicks. It's the signal you agreed on. It means tonight after moonrise. You nearly drop the tray. Later, after you've brushed your mistress's hair and whispered her prayers to sleep, you slip barefoot through the hallway. The harem never truly sleeps. There are always murmurs behind doors, restless dreams echoing through thick stone. But you've practiced. You know which floorboards don't creak, which corridors the guards avoid during their breaks. Your robe flutters behind you like a shadow and your breath is silent. You reach the courtyard. The moonlight falls like silver dust over the paving stones. There, under the fig tree, he waits. Neither of you speaks. It's too dangerous. Instead, he presses a folded scrap of fabric into your hand, blue silk, hemmed with thread the colour of saffron. Inside, stitched by hand, is a message. The fruit ripens slowly but surely. Wait. It's nothing. And everything. You press it to your chest before tucking it deep inside your sash. Here's your historical detail for the night. Lovers in the Ottoman Empire often used the smallest gestures to communicate, especially in the palace where surveillance was everywhere. Embroidered messages were common, especially when written words could be used as evidence. A pattern stitched into a handkerchief might stand for a name, a promise, or a plan. Some use knotting methods, like Turkish embroidery called oya, to hide entire sentences in loops and tassels. Your little square of blue silk is more than a gift, it's a declaration. The days blur after that. He disappears for a time. No glances, no notes. You try to act normal, but your hands tremble when you pour rose water. You think the kitchen girl is watching you. You think the head eunuch is listening more closely. You think your mistress frowns at you just a bit too long. Then after a week, a servant brings you a tray with fresh fruit. And there it is, a pomegranate split in half, another signal, the fruit has opened. That night you find him again, this time in the shadow of the bathhouse walls. Not touching, not yet, just standing close enough for your breath to reach him. "You're sure?" you whisper. He nods. There's a room, behind the scribe's chamber. No one uses it. The key is hidden behind the curtain. I can get in. And me? He looks at you steady. Leave the door unlocked. I'll make the excuse. And here's your fringe fact. Bathhouses in the Ottoman world, hammams, were places of both hygiene and politics. While most were gender segregated, those within palace grounds had private corridors and secret entrances, making them ideal for covert meetings. There are accounts of messages being passed between bath attendants and courtiers, using towels and bath oils as pretext. Of course there are scholarly debates too. Some argue that these tales are exaggerated, that the strict hierarchy of the palace made secret affairs nearly impossible. But the records are full of gaps, lost pages, disappeared names, and we all know what that really means. Someone's covering for someone. You slip into the bathhouse corridor the next day carrying a tray of lavender oil and mint towels. You act like it's routine. It's not. Your hands are ice, your mouth dry. But when you pass behind the heavy velvet curtain, there it is. A carved wooden door, slightly ajar. He's already inside. The room is small, barely more than a storage closet. Dust hangs in the air, swirling in the shaft of light from a single high window. You close the door behind you. The silence is total. And then, for the first time, you're truly alone together. No walls, no glances, just breath and heartbeat, and the unbearable nearness of someone you're not supposed to want. You don't kiss, not yet. You just sit beside him, knees touching, heads bowed, and you tell each other the truth. He tells you his real name. You tell him yours. It feels like the most intimate thing you've ever done. By the next morning, the entire palace feels different. The same marble corridors, the same carefully clipped gardens, but the air, thicker now. Every step you take feels just slightly more visible, like your shadow has started whispering on your behalf. You pass other girls in the halls and wonder, do they know? Has the silence in that little bathhouse room clung to your clothes? Has your heartbeat betrayed you? You smile when you're meant to smile, you bow when required, but inside you are shaking. That little room becomes your world. You go back once, then again and again. Not every night, that would be foolish, but often enough that it starts to feel like a rhythm, like breathing, always through a different corridor, always under the veil of a new excuse, once it's cleaning supplies, once it's inventory, once you pretend to have lost a bracelet, always with your eyes cast downward and your thoughts wound tightly behind your teeth. Inside it's quiet, safe. You don't talk much, you lie beside each other, shoulders touching, sharing the details of your lives like stolen jewellery. You learn that his mother once kept silkworms, that he hates the smell of clove, that he wanted to be a scholar, not a servant of the court. He learns that your favourite colour is smoke grey, that you once set a curtain on fire with a candle out of boredom, that your real name means hope, though you've never felt like it belonged to you until now. And one night you touch. His hand grazes yours, and you don't pull away. You press your palm to his, and it feels like a rebellion. More than words, more than poetry, you don't kiss, not yet. But the air changes. It thickens between you. You wonder if this is what drowning feels like. Not in water, but in someone else's presence. Here's your historical detail. The harem was strictly guarded, not only by eunuchs, but by the social codes enforced by the women themselves. The Valida Sultan ran the place like a prime minister. The head of the harem, Hazinadar Usta, controlled daily schedules, bed assignments, even who had access to the sultan. There were women with power and women without it, and the gap between them was treacherous. Affairs weren't just forbidden, they were seen as threats to the entire order. A concubine caught with a court official didn't just risk punishment. She risked throwing the whole web of influence into chaos. And still, people risked it. Because in a place where everything was orchestrated, where even your name wasn't really your own, falling in love wasn't just forbidden, it was liberating. It meant choosing something. It meant saying, this moment is mine. That's what you and he begin to collect, moments, not grand ones. Just tiny flashes of realness hidden inside the scripted world around you. Like the time he leaves a single almond wrapped in linen on your windowsill. You crack it open, and inside is a fragment of a dried rose petal. He's telling you something with it. Maybe, I remember your favourite flower, maybe I'm still here. Or the time you pass each other in the corridor during a royal procession, and you don't look at him, but your hands brush ever so slightly in the folds of your robes, and for the rest of the day your fingertips feel like they've been set alight. Of course, not everything goes unnoticed. One of the other girls, Nisa, starts asking questions. Harmless ones at first. You seem distracted. Did you sleep last night? Your tray is crooked. You laugh, pretend not to hear the tension in her voice. But you know what it means. She's curious. Maybe more than curious. Maybe jealous. You're careful after that. You stop bringing back notes. You stop wearing the thread around your wrist. The bathhouse room lies empty for a week. But then a new signal arrives. This time it's not subtle. tiny cup left near your sleeping mat. Inside, 2 dried jasmine blossoms, a direct message. The first flower says, "I miss you." The second, "Careful, you don't know who left it. Maybe it wasn't him, maybe someone else knows now, or maybe it's a warning. You don't sleep that night." And here's your quirky fringe fact. Ottoman court lovers sometimes used entire flower languages to communicate in private. A practice called silamam, or greeting, allowed messages to be coded using flower combinations, scents, and even the number of petals. It was most popular in the 18th century, but rooted in earlier traditions. Roses, mint, basil, jasmine, cloves, all had meaning. It was like Morse code if Morse code smelled really nice. But salam could be misread, it could be intercepted, it could also be fake. You debate whether to meet again. Days pass. The court begins preparing for a celebration, someone's birthday, or maybe an imperial wedding. You don't ask, you just use it as cover. More movement, more noise, more chances to hide. You slip into the bathhouse again. And this time he's not there. The little room is empty, dusty, cold. You sit alone on the blanket you left behind. The next morning he's at breakfast with the scribes, acting normal. Too normal. You lock eyes briefly, and in that moment you know something has changed. He's been warned. And here's tonight's scholarly debate. How much freedom did the harem really allow for romantic expression? Some historians believe that while many affairs existed, the palace was skilled at quietly covering them up. Others argue that even small transgressions were met with severe punishment, especially if they involved low-ranking women or politically sensitive men. The truth? Probably both. Depended on who you were and who you were in love with, but you're not ready to let it go. That night you go back again. He's there this time. He doesn't speak at first. Just holds out a letter. Sealed with wax. Not addressed. No names. Just a line written on the outside. If they find this, forget me. You don't take it. You say, "I'm not forgetting anything." He lowers the letter. "Then we need a new way to speak." You nod. Because now it's not just love, it's survival. The next way you speak is with laundry. Not love notes, not glances, not jasmine flowers or fig halves or whispered verses, just folded sheets and the language of creases. The laundry of the palace is its own kingdom, a swirling empire of damp linens, silk robes, towels perfumed with rosewater, and handkerchiefs embroidered by hands both noble and nervous. You join the folding line twice a week. It's boring, it's repetitive, which is exactly what makes it perfect. You start by folding everything perfectly, just like you're supposed to. Every towel a rectangle, every robe a layered triangle, every veil folded once, then again. But then, tiny changes. The corner of a sleeve left untucked, the hem of a robe flipped the wrong way, a diagonal crease where there should be a horizontal. It sounds like nothing, but to someone who knows the code it speaks volumes. A crease on the left means yes, on the right, no. A veil folded once, "I saw you today." Twice, "Be careful." 3 times and tucked under another robe, "I need to see you." He sends his reply the same way, slipping his own messages into the clean linens destined for your quarters. No one notices. Why would they? You're just one girl among dozens, lost in the rhythm of steam and fabric. You get good at reading cloth like it's poetry, and for once the messages are safe. But they're also unbearable. You haven't touched him in weeks. Haven't heard his voice. All you have is cotton and silk pressed into meaning. You wait for laundry days like you once waited for letters, for glances, for anything human, and in between, you replay every word he's ever said, every almost touch, every moment that ever felt too short. Here's your historical detail. Ottoman palace laundry work was both vital and strictly supervised. Every garment was catalogued, every linen accounted for, but it was also a loophole. Eunuchs supervised most of the deliveries, but many were overworked, and the sheer volume of clothing moving through the palace made close inspection almost impossible. Some harem girls used laundry runs to pass illicit messages, while others used stitching as a private language, a practice quietly passed from girl to girl. One night you receive something new, not a robe, not a folded veil, but a cloth scrap tucked into a bath towel. It's not fancy, just plain muslin with a line of blue thread stitched unevenly across the top. You stare at it for a long time before you understand. He's asking for a meeting. but not in the bathhouse this time. Too risky. He wants to meet in the laundry chambers themselves. It's a terrible idea, which of course means it will probably work. The laundry chambers lie at the edge of the palace, technically outside the harem, but still within the private zone. Steam rises constantly from the stone vents, and the floors are always wet. Most workers there are ignored, too busy to watch anything but their own hands, and the place smells like soap and sweat, a perfect fog for hiding. You wait until late, well past midnight, when even the most nervous attendants have retired to their mats. You pull your shawl close, wrap your hair tight, and walk the halls like someone sleepwalking. The route is longer than you remember. Twice, you hear footsteps and have to flatten yourself against a wall. Then finally, you see the steam. You push open the wooden door. Inside, warmth, mist, the hiss of water meeting hot iron, and him. He stands at the far side of the room, holding a cloth in one hand, still and watchful. You cross to him quickly, before nerves can take root. For a few minutes you say nothing, you just stand, hands touching, heads bowed close. The hiss of steam fills the silence. Then he says, "You look different." You laugh softly. "So do you." "I thought I forgot your face." "I forgot the sound of mine," you reply. He pulls a small box from under his robe, opens it. Inside, dried orange peel, cloves, and a single strand of saffron. "From the kitchen," he says. "I bribed the boy with some of my pay." You reach out and touch the saffron thread. It smells faintly of honey and hay. You ask, "What does it mean?" He says, "It means I still remember everything." You press your fingers to your lips to keep from crying. Here's your fringe fact. In the Ottoman world, spices weren't just ingredients. They were language. Orange peel meant longing. Saffron, desire. Cloves could mean pain or patience, depending on the context. Young lovers passed spice boxes the way modern couples send texts. Coded, private, sweet and risky. And more than once, those boxes were intercepted by someone not meant to receive them. You both sit on an overturned laundry basket, leaning shoulder to shoulder. There's no plan tonight, no whispered strategy, just time, just proximity. You talk about small things, what you dreamed last week, who laughed too loudly during prayers, which palace cat has claimed the best sunbeam. It feels real, but eventually reality returns. "We can't keep doing this," he says. You don't answer. You know he's right. "I want more than this," he continues. "More than a linen code and stolen hours." You stare at the steam rising from the floor. What else is there? "A way out," he says. You blink, look at him. "You mean, I've heard things. There are people, a network, for women who want to leave, for men like me, not just rumours." You feel something sharp rise in your chest. Fear, hope. It's hard to tell the difference anymore. "And if we get caught?" He shrugs. "We'll get caught eventually anyway." Here's your scholarly debate. Did escape networks for harem women and palace servants really exist? Some historians believe so, especially during the later Ottoman period. There are fragments in memoirs, hints in court records, gossip in embassy reports. Others argue it's just romantic myth, a fantasy written long after the danger passed. But then again, every legend starts with a whisper. You stand to leave. He presses the box of spices into your hand. "Don't answer yet," he says. "Just think." You nod. You open the door and vanish into the mist. The sky turns heavy the next morning, a grey that seeps into the stone walls and makes the palace feel colder than it should. The warmth from the laundry chambers fades quickly, like the touch of his hand. You keep the spice box hidden under your mattress, wedged into the wood where your fingers can find it even in the dark. You press your palm to it now and then, as if it might answer the questions unravelling in your chest. You try to go about your day as usual, combing your mistress's hair, arranging cushions, lighting candles in the inner prayer room, but your hands move without thought. Your mind is back in the steam, sitting beside him, hearing the word that still echoes in your ears. Out. You've imagined escape before, of course. Everyone in the harem does, eventually. Usually while scrubbing floors or watching the garden's gate swing open for someone else. But it always fades, that kind of fantasy. The walls are too high, the guards too watchful, your name too buried. You've been here so long you've started to forget the sound of your own language. But this feels different. He believes it, which means maybe it's real. Still, you're not foolish. A plan like this would take more than love. More than luck. It would take a guide, a disguise, timing, and above all, silence. Absolute silence. One wrong glance and it all burns. You've seen it happen. So you do what you were trained to do. You wait, you observe, you memorize, you begin watching the outer courtyards again. Not for him, but for patterns. When the spice merchants arrive, when the linen carts are checked, when the guards yawn or shift their posts, you notice one thing right away. The third guard on the east gate always walks away to spit in the corner near the fountain. Always at the same time. A small gap, a possible moment. And in the gardens, you start noticing the windows, the way one opens only halfway before jamming, the way another is always propped with a stick. You imagine slipping through them, not now, not yet, but maybe, if you had the right timing, the right shoes, the right reason. Here's your historical detail. While the palace was meticulously ordered, it was also full of human error. Forgotten routines, lazy guards, servants bribed with sweets or coins. There are reports, buried in ambassador letters and side notes of memoirs, of women disappearing from the harem, slipping away during visits to bathhouses or during religious holidays when supervision loosened. Not many, not often, but enough to know that cracks existed in the walls. A few days later, a new message arrives. Not in the laundry this time, but on your meal tray. Tucked beneath a folded napkin is a string, thin, black, knotted in 3 places. A new code. You take it back to your room and study it beneath your curtain. The first knot is near the top, the second toward the middle, and the last near the bottom. You think 3 stages, 3 steps. Later, during prayers, you spot him across the courtyard. He's not looking at you, but he taps the railing beside him 3 times. Step 1. You receive your next instruction 2 days later. A thread tied to a scrap of linen laid across the wash table. This time there's a smudge of ash on the edge. You know what it means. Burn after reading. You sneak it into the corner of the bathhouse's heating chamber, press it into the embers, and watch the message curl into smoke. You didn't even get to finish reading it. But that's the game now. Everything fragile, everything flammable. That night, you walk the upper terrace under cover of errands, your hands full of herbs meant for your mistress's tea. He meets you near the citrus trees, just briefly, not to talk, just to pass something. A coin, except it's not real. It's a button painted gold, hollow inside, with a piece of paper so thin it rustles like dry leaves. You open it back in your room. It says, "Meet me when the window sings." You reread it until the ink fades. Here's your fringe fact. Some lovers in the Ottoman court used coins and buttons to smuggle messages, especially when paper became too dangerous. Some even carved notes into the undersides of ivory combs or the soles of shoes. There are rumours of entire love letters passed via embroidery, written in minuscule thread along the hems of robes, decipherable only under candlelight. Survival required creativity, so did longing. You spend the next week listening to windows. There's one near the kitchens, old and rusted. Every morning when the wind is strong, it hums, a long, low note like a wine glass being rubbed. It sings. The third time you hear it, you know it's the signal. You leave your post just long enough to pass through the corridor behind it. He's waiting in the supply room, the one behind the kitchens, always warm, always busy. He pulls you in quickly, locks the door. He looks different now, more tense, more tired. The plan is in motion, he says. You stare. What plan? What's the next step? There's someone on the outside, a contact. They can get us through the garden gate. But only one of us at a time. You blink. What do you mean one at a time? He sighs. We go separately, then meet again outside. It's safer, less suspicious. You step back. No, I won't leave alone. You have to, it's the only way. And now the fear rises, loud and hot in your throat. You are ready for danger, for the chase, for the risk. But not this, not separation. What if you don't come? You whisper. He looks at you, really looks. Then you're free, and that has to be enough. Here's your scholarly debate. How coordinated were escape plans from the palace? Some records suggest that escapees had help from outside networks, spies, merchants, even sympathetic officials. Others argue most escape attempts were desperate and isolated. Still, the stories of success always share one thing in common. They required a split. 2 lovers, taking 2 paths, trusting the world to reunite them later. You hold the coin between your fingers and nod. Tell me when, you say. He leans close. Soon. You don't touch it, you just breathe. And listen to the window hum. You don't sleep for 3 days, not really. You close your eyes sometimes, but your body doesn't trust rest anymore. Your ears stay awake, always tilted toward the door. You dream in fragments, footsteps in its gravel corridor, a gate swinging open into darkness, a face in the smoke that may or may not be his. The moment has grown too large for your body to contain. Every breath feels like a countdown. When the next message comes, it's hidden in your food again, inside a dried apricot. The kitchen girl hands you the tray, yawns, and walks off. She doesn't know, you don't think she knows, but her eyes linger too long. Everyone's do lately. You wait until you're alone and peel open the fruit. Inside, a sliver of parchment, curled and sticky. 3 nights from now, crescent moon, rooftop door. You read it twice. You don't cry, you don't smile. You just swallow the apricot, parchment and all, and go back to trimming the wick of your mistress's lantern like nothing in the world is happening. But everything is happening. You start preparing the only way you can by erasing yourself. You stop asking questions. You stop speaking unless spoken to. You wear your plainest robe, the one without embroidery. You wash your hair with soap that smells like nothing. You want to become air. You even practice your walk, making it quieter, shorter, as proud. You've spent your whole life learning how to make yourself noticed just enough to survive. Now you learn how to vanish. The day before your escape, you are assigned to help clean the Sultan's outer chambers. It's rare. A privilege, technically, but it makes you sweat in places robes can't hide. Too many eyes, too many risks. The hall is filled with sunlight and silence, and every polished tile reflects your nerves back at you like a mirror. You almost drop a bowl when you hear a voice behind you. Not his voice. A eunuch. "Careful, girl," he says flatly. You nod. Keep your eyes down. But in the corner of your vision, you see something strange. A single pomegranate seed on the floor. Glimmering. Deliberate. You pretend not to notice it. But later, when no one's looking, you walk past again and slip it into your sleeve. That night, you crush it between your fingers and smear the juice onto your palm like ink. He's still here. Here's your historical detail. In the Ottoman palace, many women escaped detection not by hiding but by performing, by becoming exactly what everyone expected them to be: quiet, pious, predictable. There are even accounts of women faking illness or spiritual possession to excuse their erratic behaviour while planning escapes or passing messages. You think of that now as you fake a headache to leave early, as you lie on your mat clutching your stomach, eyes wide open in the dark. 3 nights pass like glass. Beautiful, sharp, and then it comes. The moon is a crescent, thin, pale, almost invisible. The wind has picked up just enough to mask footsteps, to rattle windows. You rise at the exact moment you're meant to, gather nothing, wear only your robe and softest shoes. You press your hand to the floor one last time, cold stone, and whisper goodbye to everything you've ever known. You slip into the corridor. There's no one there. No guards, no whispers, no footsteps, and just you and the quiet. You find the rooftop door easily. It's the one near the east tower, behind the linen shelves. It's old, warped, used only by servants to air out bedding. You pull it open and step into the night. The wind hits you first. Cool and damp, it carries the scent of coal smoke and distant water. You feel the sky above you like a weightless ceiling. For the first time in years, you're outside, really outside. No lattices, no screens, just the open skiing. He's waiting there. Not in his usual robes, not dressed like a court official, but like a stable boy or a traveller. His face is half shadow, half moonlight. You reach him and say nothing. He hands you a small bundle, clothes, a scarf, a vial of something that smells like basil and ash. "Wear this once you're past the gate," he says. "You'll smell like the cook's garden and it helps." You nod. Your throat is too tight for words. Then he steps back. "You go first. I follow tomorrow. The route's already set." Your eyes widen. "But we agreed," he says gently. "One at a time, trust me." And here's your fringe fact. Some Ottoman escape routes passed directly over rooftops. The palace architecture included hidden staircases, ventilation passages, and maintenance walkways rarely used by anyone other than labourers. These networks could connect the harem to outer courtyards and even the harbour. Though they were dangerous, unguarded, steep and easy to fall from, they were used not just by lovers, but by spies, assassins and desperate servants. You walk the ledge beside him in silence. He lifts a panel in the rooftop, a trapdoor disguised by tiles, and gestures inside. "It leads to a tunnel," he says. "Follow it. Keep left at every fork. You'll come out near the back wall. A cart will be waiting. Just walk. Don't run." You look at him, terrified. What if something goes wrong? He smiles softly. "Then I'll fix it." You hesitate, and then you kiss him. Not a whisper of a touch, not a brush of lips in a corridor. A real kiss. His mouth on yours. Warm, full, human. You pull back breathless and step into the trapdoor. The darkness swallows you. Here's the scholarly debate for tonight. Were any of these palace escapes ever successful, or were they all just half-finished dreams, recorded only in whispers and poetry? The imperial records are curiously silent on this topic, either because it never happened, or because those in power didn't want anyone to know it did. The only evidence left behind lies in songs, in folk tales, in the silence of missing names. You move through the tunnel slowly, your hands skimming damp stone. Your breath echoes too loudly. Rats skitter ahead of you. The floor slopes downward. You feel time stretching, warping, and then light. A sliver, a door. You push it open and find yourself behind the palace wall. The cart is there. The driver doesn't look at you. You climb in. The night is huge. The stars unfiltered. The road begins. The cart is packed with sacks of lentils and dried chickpeas, and you bury yourself among them as instructed, your heart pounding like a drum echoing up through your ribs. The fabric smells faintly of cumin and old dust, and you try to breathe through your mouth to keep from sneezing. Every jolt of the wheels is an accusation, every creak of the axle a prayer you can't stop repeating in your head. Let them think I'm nothing. Let them look past me. You listen for the sounds of boots, for the clink of a sword or the call of a guard asking questions he's not supposed to. But the only voice you hear is the cart driver humming a tune so off-key it sounds like a bird falling down a flight of stairs. Maybe that's the signal that he's not nervous. Or maybe he's just a fool. Minutes pass, or hours. It's impossible to tell. You imagine the palace shrinking behind you room by room, till it's just a shadow over the water. You imagine him still up on the rooftop watching you disappear. The cart bumps hard and you instinctively tense. But then it slows, stops. You hear voices. 2 men. One says something about spices. The other, calm, disinterested, says, "Let it pass." The cart rolls again. You don't breathe until it creaks to a halt beside a nondescript house on the edge of the harbour district. A knock on the side panel, 2 short, 1 long. Your signal. You sit up, blinking against the sudden light as a hooded figure appears, hand outstretched. No question, just movement. You follow the figure inside down a short hallway that smells of vinegar and ash, then into a room that's little more than a box with a rug and a tin lamp. The hooded woman, middle-aged, scarred face, eyes like broken glass, nods once. "You're the first," she says. You don't ask what that means. You already know. He hasn't arrived yet. She gives you food, a bowl of rice and lentils, nothing else, and a cup of sour cherry water. Don't leave. Don't look out the window. Don't light anything. And if anyone comes to the door who isn't me, hide in the chimney. You nod, you eat, you try not to vomit. That night, sleep doesn't come. You lie on the rug staring at the ceiling, replaying every possible outcome. He's coming. He said he would. But your thoughts are traitors. You imagine him caught. You imagine him choosing not to follow. You imagine him falling. You whisper his name into the darkness like a thread you're trying not to lose. Here's your historical detail. There were safe houses all across Istanbul, homes used by rebels, smugglers, dissidents, and yes, occasionally runaway harem women. They weren't marked. They weren't advertised. But they existed, tucked between bathhouses and spice markets, passed along in whispers. Some were run by former palace staff, women who'd gotten out themselves and knew exactly what was at stake. The next day the woman returns. No news. She gives you a change of clothes, a travelling outfit coarsely sewn but clean, a headscarf and a pair of worn boots. Put it on, get used to it. You'll be wearing this for a while. You do. The boots pinch. The scarf smells like pine smoke. The fabric itches. You love it. It means freedom. By the second day your body begins to uncoil. You scrub the floor, help chop vegetables, practice walking with a slight limp. A new identity is being stitched around you. You call yourself Layla now. It doesn't feel right. Yeah, not yet, but it will. Still no word from him. You start checking the window despite being told not to. Just quick glances, Out at the street, at the shadows moving past, a child playing with a stick, a sailor spitting on the cobblestones, a man in uniform who doesn't stop walking. You begin to count breaths between footsteps, count heartbeats between bells, and then, on the fourth night, he arrives. You don't hear him at first. You're chopping carrots, lost in your thoughts, when the woman steps in and says, "You have company?" You turn, and there he is, standing in the doorway, dishevelled, dusty, alive. You drop the knife. For a moment, you both just stare. There's too much to say, and none of it matters. So you close the space between you in 3 steps and wrap your arms around him. He holds you so tightly you almost forget to breathe. He whispers, "I told you I'd find you." You whisper, "I almost didn't believe it." Then you step back and hit him, hard on the arm. "What took you so long?" "I had to bribe a guard with my boots." "You're not wearing any boots." "I'm aware." And here's your fringe fact. The docks and harbour towns of Istanbul were the ultimate disappearing act. People passed through daily, merchants, sailors, pilgrims, scholars. If you changed your clothes, your accent, your pace, you could become someone else in a matter of hours. The empire was massive and it had gaps. If you were brave or desperate or lucky, you could fall into one and never be found again. That night, you sit on the rooftop of the safe house watching the water. He's beside you, his shoulder against yours. For the first time since the harem, you're not afraid of being seen. There's nothing soft about your love now. Nothing tentative. It's real, and it's loud, and it's burned into your skin. You ask him, "What happens next?" He shrugs. "We move. East, maybe, or south. Somewhere the Sultan's eye doesn't reach." "Are you sure there's a place like that?" "No," he says, "but we'll keep walking until the sky feels wide again." You take his hand. "Then let's start tomorrow." Here's the scholarly debate. Did these lovers ever really make it? Did they settle down in some nameless village, open a shop, raise goats and children, and never tell a soul where they came from? Or were they eventually tracked down, brought back in chains, or worse, forgotten entirely? We don't know. History is full of gaps like this. But some names vanish on purpose. Some lives continue not on parchment, but in breath. And maybe that's enough. The morning after he arrives, everything shifts again. The room feels smaller now, more temporary. The little safe house you'd started to pretend was home now buzzes with urgency. You've had your reunion. You've seen that he's alive, warm, real. That moment has passed. Now it's back to the plan, assuming there is one. The woman with the glassy eyes doesn't ask many questions, but she watches, always. And when you and he sit too close, when your laughter slips out too loud, she scolds you with a silence sharper than any blade. By noon she pulls you both aside. No ceremony, just, "The city isn't safe anymore." You ask, "For us?" "For anyone." Word spreading, someone escaped the harem. You and he exchange a glance. Quick, heavy, guilty. The woman's expression doesn't change. "I'll get you as far as the ferry. After that, you vanish." Ferry. That means crossing the Bosphorus, leaving the city entirely. That thought lands in your chest like a stone. You always imagined freedom as open air and mountains. But now the idea of being far from Istanbul, far from its familiar arches and winding streets, makes your skin crawl. You sleep that night on the floor again, shoulder to shoulder with him, sharing one blanket. Neither of you says a word about what you're leaving behind. You both know it too well, the scrape of marble under bare feet, the smell of rose oil in the halls, the hiss of silk robes brushing past you in the dark. You'll never see it again. Not the women you grew up with, not the guards who watched you, not the old woman who once braided your hair with rosemary and said your eyes were cursed. Nothing. Here's your historical detail. Escaping Istanbul didn't mean freedom, at least not immediately. The empire stretched far beyond the city, and even once you left its heart, you still had to pass checkpoints, border towns, nosy imams, and local lords who liked to ask too many questions. Which is why most fugitives chose to disappear not in grand gestures, but by melting into the background. Disguises, cover stories, silence. The next morning she gives you a box, inside peasant clothes, a new headscarf, a bundle of dried fruit, a flask of water. She gives him a walking stick, worn sandals, and a fake merchant's permit. She says, "If anyone asks, you're cousins from Edirne, heading to Anatolia to care for a sick aunt." He asks, "What's the aunt's name?" She smiles grimly. Don't make it that complicated. You leave at dawn. The ferry is barely more than a raft with seats. The water beneath you gleams like hammered glass. Istanbul watches from behind, domes and minarets softened by morning mist. You don't look back. He does, but you don't. Halfway across, a boat passes too close, a soldier's patrol, and you both freeze. One of them stares too long. Then he turns away. You exhale so hard you feel lightheaded. The woman meets you on the opposite shore, dressed as a fisherman's wife now, carrying a basket of dead fish and indifference. She walks you a short distance down the pier, then stops. "I can't go further," she says. "There's a man waiting at the stables. His name is irrelevant. He'll get you inland." You say thank you. She just nods. Before you go, she reaches into her cloak and presses something into your hand, a coin. It's worn smooth, almost shapeless. "For luck," she says, then adds, "You'll need more than that." And here's your fringe fact. Many safe house operators in Ottoman cities were women. Former concubines, widows, bath attendants, people who had seen too much and were no longer afraid to bend the rules. They often worked in pairs or small networks, trading favours, spice and silence. They didn't do it for coin, they did it for vengeance, or freedom, or sometimes just because they could. You find the man at the stables. He says nothing, just points to a wagon. You sit in the back, wrapped in a blanket, pretending to sleep. He doesn't look at you. He smells of tobacco and onions and has the face of someone who's forgotten how to care. You pass towns, markets, olive groves, horses tied under fig trees. No one stops you, no one asks. That night, you sleep in a shed beside the wagon. He holds your hand under the blanket. You watch the stars through a gap in the boards. And for the first time since your escape, you whisper your real name again. Just once, just to yourself, to remember. You travel like this for days. He invents stories for every town, your cousins, or newlyweds, or a peddler and his sister. You say nothing. You let him talk. Your voice is still too fragile. Here's your scholarly debate. How many harem escapees truly made it to freedom? Did they build new lives, open bakeries, raise children under false names? Or were they always looking over their shoulders, waiting for the sound of boots? Some scholars say most were caught within a year. Others say they simply vanished, became part of the empire's living memory, unnamed but unforgettable. The truth? Maybe both. One night he pulls something from his bag, a new scarf. "This is yours now," he says. It's soft, patterned with little gold crescents. "Why?" you ask. "So people will notice your face before they ask your name." You look at him, and for the first time it doesn't feel like running, it feels like beginning. By the time you reach the inland village, your feet no longer feel like yours. They're blistered, swollen, hardening into something useful, tools for travel, not ornaments for display. The road has become a rhythm. Sunrise, dust, silence, rest, repeat. The man who drove the wagon leaves you at a fork in the road with a nod so small you might have missed it if you weren't watching. No goodbyes, no instructions, just an end to one thread and the start of another. The village itself is barely more than a handful of houses stitched together with smoke and mud. There's a single well, a small mosque, with cracked white walls, and a marketplace where dried apricots hang in sun-beaten strings like garlands of gold. You arrive just as the call to prayer echoes through the fields, and for a moment the world stills. You both stop walking, just stand there, and for the first time it hits you. You're not running anymore. You've arrived. That night you sleep in a borrowed loft above a spice shop. It smells like cinnamon and sweat and something you can't quite name. The woman who owns the place, an old widow with a mole the size of a coin on her cheek, gives you a blanket and a bowl of lentil soup without questions. The only thing she says before climbing the stairs to her own room is, "Don't talk too much. People remember talk." You don't. The next morning you begin your new life. He becomes a merchant's apprentice, carrying sacks, weighing beans, learning how to haggle in a dialect that still catches on his tongue. You become something less visible. You help the widow sweep, cook, wrap parcels of herbs and dried fruit in wax cloth. Occasionally you go to the well, head down, hands folded, but you watch, always watching. And here's your historical detail. For those who managed to flee the centre of the empire, villages like this one became havens. Their anonymity offered more than protection. It gave them space to rebuild themselves from the inside out. The Ottomans prized hierarchy, title, ritual, but out here, where the empire was thin and tired, people stopped asking questions if you could work and kept to yourself. being unremarkable was survival. Still, danger lingers. It never quite leaves. One morning, a travelling preacher arrives. A young man in a white turban speaking loudly at the square about modesty, obedience, the dangers of vanity. He looks at you too long. You make sure never to pass him again without a basket covering your face. The widow notices. She tells you, he's from Edern, too curious. You begin avoiding the market altogether. Another day, a boy in the village, maybe 12, maybe 30, asks you where you're from, and you smile and say, I don't remember, and he laughs, thinks it's a joke. You let him believe it. At night, you and he sit on the rooftop just like you did back in the city. The stars are sharper out here, the air cooler. He makes up stories about the constellations. You braid herbs into your scarf. You start to believe just a little that this might work, that this might last. But of course, it's never that simple. Here's your fringe fact. Coded poetry, gazelles and qasidas were used across the Ottoman Empire as a form of secret expression. Lovers would embed messages in poems passed through mosques, bathhouses and marketplaces. A certain verse might mean I'm safe, while another might signal danger. Scholars have since uncovered dozens of poems whose true meanings only revealed themselves when compared line by line with known court records. It was a culture that learned to say everything without ever speaking directly. He starts writing again, short verses, folded into tea packets, hidden beneath floorboards, not for anyone but you. One night you find one under your bowl. It says, the wind still knows your name, even if you don't say it out loud. You press it to your chest like a prayer, but you also start to worry. He's drawing attention again. People notice poetry, people remember beauty, and beauty, in a place like this, is dangerous. You tell him, maybe stop for now. He nods, doesn't argue, but you see the loss in his eyes. There's a debate among historians about whether love like this could survive outside the palace, once stripped of its risk, its tension, its secrecy. Some argue that what people felt inside the harem wasn't love, but pressure, desire tangled in fear. Others say the opposite, that only in the crucible of danger does something as fragile as love prove itself real. You still don't know what you believe, but you know what you feel. You start building routines. Friday market, Thursday bread baking, daily prayers. You measure your safety by the predictability of your week, until the preacher returns. This time he brings a soldier. Not an imperial janissary, just a local guard. But the message is clear. Someone is asking questions. That night the widow brings you a bundle. You'll leave at sunrise, she says. Your chest tightens. Why? Because this town is tired of mysteries, she replies. And because I'd rather you vanish than be dragged out. You nod. There's nothing else to say. You pack quickly. Nothing of value. A scarf. 3 verses. A dried apricot pit. The button from the harem. The coin the woman gave you on the dock. Before bed, you and he sit outside one last time. You say, I thought we were safe. He shrugs. Maybe we were. For a moment. You whisper, I'm tired of running. I know. Then he takes your hand. We'll find a place. One without walls. One that doesn't ask where we came from. You nod. It sounds like hope, but not the kind from stories. The quiet kind, the hard kind, and the kind you build with your hands. You leave the village in silence. No farewell, no trace. The sky hasn't even started to pink, and already your feet are on the road again, cool and damp with dew. The widow hands you a satchel and disappears before either of you can say thank you. He walks beside you, shoulders tense, jaw locked. You don't ask if he's angry. He's not. Just tired of becoming someone new every time someone starts to notice him. You are too. You follow the old trade path eastward, moving with the merchants and pilgrims who start early to avoid the sun. The further you get from the coast, the harder the air becomes, dustier, drier, full of buzzing flies and thorny weeds. But no one asks your names. No one watches too long. In this part of the empire, people see strangers and keep walking. You reach a town 3 days later, bigger than the last, with real buildings and camels that look older than time. A river cuts through its centre, slow and brown, and there's a smell in the air like dried milk and river fish. You're both too tired to be cautious, so you find a tea house with cushions worn thin and ask for something hot. The man behind the counter looks at you both and says nothing, just pours 2 cups of black tea and nods to a corner. You sit there, back to the wall, and exhale in sync. No one is chasing you yet, but still the fear rides close. You've learned by now it never travels far behind. He asks, "Should we stay here?" You consider it. It has the right kind of quiet, dusty, slow, unimportant, but you shake your head. "One more town," you say, "just to be sure." He agrees. That night, you stay at a caravanserai, an inn for travellers. You pay in coin, and they don't ask where it came from. The room is small, the floor cold, but the walls are thick and the door locks. You sleep curled against each other like letters folded in an envelope. When you wake, the sun has already begun to warm the shutters, and for once there are no nightmares in your mouth. Here's your historical detail. The Ottoman Empire was woven together by thousands of caravanserais, spread across its territory like a string of beads. They weren't just inns, they were centres of trade, gossip and passage. Merchants, nomads, pilgrims and fugitives passed through them daily. Some stayed for a night, some disappeared into them for months. The empire moved through these places like blood through veins. At breakfast you hear a song. A man with a saz sitting by the well plays a tune you haven't heard since the harem. Soft, slow, like honey dripping into a bowl. It's not a public song, not one for markets. It's private, meant for someone, a lover's tune. You glance at him, but he's already looking at you. Later, when you're packing your satchel, he says, "Do you ever miss it?" You pretend not to understand. The song? No, the harem, the rituals, the safety. You pause. There are things you miss, the baths, the poetry, the predictability. But then you remember the silences, the stares, the weight of being watched. You shake your head. I only miss the girl I used to be before I knew how much they lied. He nods. Me too. You walk the last leg of your journey with fewer words. The land changes, flatter now, open. Fields stretch wide with olive trees and lazy sheep. The road hums with insects and the chirp of distant herdsmen. You feel it before you see it. Something waiting. The town you reach doesn't have a name on the map. It's marked only by a bend in the road and a clump of white-walled houses. The people here move slowly. Their eyes are kind. You pay a man with crooked teeth to use his stable, and he points to a house with blue shutters. Vacant. Belonged to a weaver. She died last winter. You don't ask what happened. You knock. No one answers. The key's still hanging under the eaves. You move in. Here's your fringe fact. In parts of Anatolia during the 17th and 18th centuries, it was common practice to leave a key hidden somewhere on the outside of a house, if the owner had no heirs, a kind of invitation for the desperate. Villagers preferred homes to be used, even by strangers, rather than left to rot. It was a quiet generosity woven into rural life, unspoken, practical and deeply Ottoman. The house is small, one room, a hearth, a dusty rug, a copper basin, but the shutters open wide and let in the sun, and when the wind blows, it smells like rosemary and river salt. You clean it together, you sweep, hang new herbs, patch the roof, you sew curtains, he builds a stool. Neither of you talks about staying, you just do it. People start to recognise you. The woman at the bread oven smiles. The boy who sells eggs winks when you ask for 2 instead of 1. An old man gives you a dog, a mutt with one eye and a taste for figs. You call him Yaram, half. He follows you everywhere. Your life becomes full of small things, boiling rice, stitching hems, watching storms come in, learning which tree the wind favours, nights with your feet in his lap reading verses by candlelight, mornings when the world feels like something you might finally believe in, and still you keep one bag packed, just in case. Here's the scholarly debate. Do we believe in happy endings because they're possible, or because we need them to be? Some historians dismiss tales of harem lovers escaping into quiet lives as fantasy, born from guilt and nostalgia. Others argue that history is full of quiet disappearances that never made the records. That love, when hidden well enough, can outlive empires. One night you sit outside watching the stars. He brings you a piece of cloth, blue silk, old, fraying at the corners. From your sash, he says. Back then. You run your fingers across the thread. You remember. You wrap it around your wrist and whisper, "Still fits." And you both laugh. Not quietly, not carefully, but fully, like you finally belong to yourselves. The seasons turn without permission. Spring curls into summer, and your days swell with heat and hum. You start to recognize time by the smell of the fields, first green, then dry, then heavy with dust. The olive trees shimmer silver in the wind, and your little house becomes part of the scenery, the kind of place travellers don't notice and locals eventually stop questioning. You and he no longer count days by distance. Now it's measured in bread rises, in laundry dry times, in the soft creaks of your roof cooling after sunset. The villagers begin to speak to you more freely. A woman brings you goat milk without asking for coin. The baker's wife asks for help when she falls sick. One boy, barefoot, wild-haired, always sticky, follows you for a full day before declaring that you remind him of someone from a story his grandfather told. You ask who. He shrugs. A ghost, maybe. You take it as a compliment. Still, you don't let your guard down completely. The bag by the door remains packed. You keep your old scarf hidden in a clay jar. Once a month you go to the edge of town and walk the old roads just to make sure no one's asking questions. You pretend you're checking the weather. He pretends not to notice that you do this. But one day, as you come back from the market, you hear someone call your name. Not Layla, not cousin, not miss. Your real name, the one you buried. You freeze. The call came from a stranger on the other side of the market square, an old man hunched over a pile of grapes. He's not looking at you, not even sure if he got it right. But you heard it, plain as thunder. You drop your basket. The grapes roll across the dirt. The world leans sideways. When you get home, you don't tell him, not that night. Instead, you sit on the stoop trying to remember if the name really was yours, or just a ghost calling someone else. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe someone else, somewhere far from here, has your name too. But your stomach knows better. Here's your historical detail. Names in the Ottoman Empire weren't always fixed. Many women in the harem were given new names upon entry, often Arabic, Persian, or poetic titles that signified beauty or fate. Their birth names were rarely used again, but outside the palace those names could carry weight. A certain name might appear in a missing persons edict, or on a list held by bounty hunters, or whispered among palace spies posing as traders. Sometimes the right name in the wrong place was enough to ruin you. The next morning you do tell him. He listens, jaw tense, eyes narrowed, not with panic, but with clarity. Then we leave, he says, just like that. No hesitation. You shake your head. It could have been nothing. You don't believe that. No, but I want to. He starts packing anyway. And here's the fringe fact. There were travelling entertainers in the Ottoman world, Medda storytellers, who carried more than tales. Some were informants, some spread gossip under the guise of performance. Others recited poetry that was really code. Messages passed between cities by way of metaphor. One verse could tip off an entire province to a fugitive's location without ever saying a name. That afternoon a storyteller passes through your town. Coincidence? Maybe. But you watch his every move and you don't go to hear him perform. You stay inside, peeking through the wooden slats. He's old, dusty, with a voice like cracked paper. But some of his phrases stick. He tells a story about a girl from the palace who disappears into the trees. He says she becomes a stream, a bird, a mist. You don't like how long he looks at your window. That night, Comtes, you and he sit with the bag between you. You say, I don't want to run again. He says, then don't. Walk. You ask, what's the difference? He thinks. One is fear, the other is choice. You sleep with your shoes on. The next morning the baker's wife stops you in the market. She leans in and whispers, they asked about you. Who? 2 men. Didn't give names, said they were looking for a missing woman. You feel your blood pool in your feet. I told them you were from Konya, that your husband died, that you have no family. You swallow. Why? She looks you in the eye. Because you taught my daughter how to read. You thank her. Try not to cry and leave the bread behind. When you return home, he's already outside, the packed bag slung over his shoulder, the dog circling his feet. We'll leave tonight, he says. You nod. That afternoon you make soup, sweep the floor, braid your hair, fold the blanket you never used. You bury your real name in the yard, carving it into a sliver of wood and pressing it into the earth under the rosemary bush. You whisper, stay here, grow something better. That night, under the cover of sleep and the whisper of wind, you slip out of the town. No one sees you, except maybe the old man by the well, who nods once without a word. Here's the scholarly debate. Did these lovers ever truly find peace? Or were they always a step ahead of the past, bound to the road, to reinvention, to silence? Some say they never stopped moving, that love built in fear can't rest. Others say the opposite, that if the roots were strong enough, they found a place, maybe not in books, but in gardens, in children, in stories whispered long after the names were forgotten. You don't know yet where you're going, but you know you'll get there together. And this time you're not running, you're choosing. You walk through the night in silence, the road lit only by a sliver of moon and the dull amber glow of your lantern, which you keep hooded most of the time. Behind you the town shrinks into shadow. In front of you everything is dark and unknown. You've learned by now that the best roads are the ones no one recommends, the ones too overgrown, too winding, too forgotten. Those are the paths of ghosts, of fugitives, of people who once belonged somewhere but no longer do. The dog trots ahead, occasionally looking back as if to say, "Keep up, slow bones." You feel the ache in your hips, the weight of the satchel pulling on your shoulder like guilt. He doesn't complain either. Your silence is comfortable now, like well-worn cloth. Words will come when they need to, not before. You pass a broken fountain around a dawn, its lion-head spout cracked and rusted. Beneath it, a trickle of water still leaks into a basin thick with moss. You stop to drink, cupping your hands. The water tastes like iron and grass. He washes his face, then splashes yours when you're not looking. You yelp and nearly drop your scarf. For the first time in days you laugh. And that somehow makes it real again. You're still alive, still free, still moving. By midday you stumble upon a grove of mulberry trees and collapse beneath them. The leaves dance overhead like lazy whispers. He lies beside you, arms behind his head, and the dog curls up at your feet, one eye open. You both rest, not sleep, just pause, breathing, listening. You think about the last time you felt this kind of quiet. It wasn't in the palace. It wasn't in the safe house. It was during a storm years ago, when lightning knocked out every lantern in the harem, and the only light came from the sky. You remember the sound of rain on marble, and the thrill of knowing for a few hours no one could see you, the freedom of it, the invisibility. Now the invisibility is your life. You leave the grove by dusk and follow a trail that curves toward the hills. In the distance you spot smoke, thin and blue. Not a village, a shepherd's camp maybe. You take a wide arc around it. Too soon for new people. That night you sleep in the open. No fire, just each other for warmth, and the scent of crushed time beneath your blanket. You whisper stories to him, half memories from childhood, blurred by time and lies. He tells you about a horse he once wanted to steal, a fountain he once bathed in during a drought. Neither of you says what you're really thinking. Will we have to live like this forever? Here's your historical detail. Ottoman fugitives often travelled through the lesser-used Yayla routes, summer pastures used by nomads and shepherds. These highland paths were rarely patrolled, and many were known only to locals. Some say these routes became informal refugee corridors, used by deserters, escaped slaves, runaway wives, and yes, lovers. These places weren't on maps. They existed in memory and mud. On the fourth day of walking, you reach a monastery. Not grand, just a weathered stone building with a wooden bell and a low garden wall crawling with honeysuckle. The monk who opens the gate looks at you both, squints at your dusty clothes, then simply says, "Hungry?" You nod. He feeds you lentils and bread, both rough and perfect. The inside of the monastery smells like candle wax and old books. You sit on stone benches, soaking in the stillness. You ask if you can stay the night. The monk nods. We don't ask where people come from, only what work they'll do tomorrow. You smile. We're very good at sweeping. That night the monastery sleeps early. You and he lie in a loft beneath the rafters, staring at the ceiling where moths chase one another in slow, dizzy loops. I like it here, you whisper. He turns his head toward you. Then maybe we stay a few days. You think we can? He grins. We swept the whole courtyard. I think we've earned it. You both smile in the dark. Here's your fringe fact. Some religious houses in the Ottoman world, especially among Sufi orders, acted as sanctuaries, places that offered shelter without requiring explanation. The dervish lodges, or teks, were known to take in anyone in need of rest, poor travellers, widows, strangers. They valued humility and service above pedigree. Some even helped fugitives find new identities, discreetly of course. Over the next few days your muscles relax, your footsteps lose their edge. You tend the herb garden. He repairs a wall. The dog charms every monk in sight. You sleep with the windows open. You stop listening for boots. One morning a monk brings you a parcel. From a traveller who passed through yesterday, left no name, said it was for the girl with silver eyes. Your heart skips, you unwrap it slowly. Inside a scarf, deep green, soft as moss, and tucked inside the folds, a card with a single phrase stitched in thread. Your swords is your strength. You don't recognise the handwriting. You show him. He studies it, then says, "Someone's watching out for us," or warning us. You wear the scarf the next day anyway. Not because you're unafraid, but because you're done being afraid of being seen. Here's your scholarly debate. Were there entire networks dedicated to hiding fugitives, especially women, from the Ottoman system? Some argue it was coincidence, kindness from strangers, not strategy. Others believe a quiet resistance existed, composed of former concubines, dissidents and soon sympathetic Sufis. There's no official record of it. But again, some truths were never written down. They were passed in the shape of a scarf or the way a monk says nothing at all. You stay for another week. The garden blooms under your care. The wall he fixed doesn't crumble. For once there is no urgency, and you wonder, could this be the end of the road? Could you stay? Not just for safety, but for peace. You wake to birdsong and the smell of warm stone. Morning seeps through the wooden slats of the loft, golden and quiet, painting everything in amber. He's already up, his side of the blanket cool, his boots missing. You find him in the courtyard, sleeves rolled, watering the herb beds as if he's been doing it all his life. The monks nod to him like he's always belonged. You lean on the stone doorway and watch for a moment before calling out, "You missed the basil?" He doesn't look up. "No, I didn't." You smile. He's right. The days pass gently. You both earn your keep in sweat and silence. You mend robes. He stacks firewood. The dog sleeps in the shade and growls at nothing in particular. One monk teaches you how to bake flatbread on the stone hearth. Another shows him how to use a wood plane. Each night, you sit under the stars and say nothing about the past. And somehow it begins to feel further away. Not erased, but folded, like a letter placed gently back into its envelope. It's the longest you have ever stayed anywhere since the escape. 2 weeks, 3, the monks stop calling you traveller, and they start calling you by the name you gave them. Layla. You almost believe it's yours, but the past has a strange habit. It doesn't knock. It just walks in. One afternoon, a young monk arrives from another region. He's thin, pale, and carries a travelling bag with a broken strap. You help him sew it. He thanks you and asks where you're from. You answer with a lie you've told a dozen times. A village that doesn't exist anymore. He laughs. It sounds peaceful. And then he pulls out a book. Old. Worn. "Found this at the last lodger," he says. "Thought someone here might want it." You glance at the cover, your breath catches. The emblem pressed into the leather, an elegant tulip within a crescent, was the harem's crest. You've seen it etched into combs, into mirrors, into the spines of prayer books handed to the concubines before bed. You reach for the book with hands that try not to tremble. Inside, the pages are warped but readable. It's a collection of verses, poetry, gazelle. You flip through absently, until you find a slip of paper pressed between 2 pages. It's been folded many times. You open it slowly. It reads, "The sparrow sings in a strange land, but her heart still knows the garden." There's no signature, no name, just the read. You fold it and hide it in your sleeve. That night you tell him. You show him the book, the slip. He frowns. "Do you think they're watching?" You shake your head. "I think someone is reminding me." "Of what?" "That I'm not invisible." And here's your historical detail. Poetry remained one of the most powerful modes of secret expression in the Ottoman world, especially among women. Even inside the palace, concubines wrote and exchanged verses coded with longing, sorrow and rebellion. Some of these poems escaped the palace long after the women themselves vanished. Others were found in private journals passed down silently through generations. They weren't just words, they were footprints. He leans back on his hands and watches the firelight flicker across your face. "You miss it sometimes," he says. "The palace." You shake your head. "No, just the girl I was trying to be. The one I never got to finish becoming." He nods. "So let's finish her here." And just like that, you decide to stay. You begin teaching some of the younger monks how to write. just a few in the early evenings under the arch by the olive tree. You give them lines from anonymous poems, you teach them to fold messages between stanzas, to listen for the pauses in silence. He takes to the woodworking shop, builds shelves, repairs doors, carves spoons and combs with steady hands. He makes you one, a comb with a tulip etched into the spine. The petals curve like a secret you both remember but never speak. You keep the dog. Of course, here's your fringe fact. In remote parts of the empire, concubines who escaped often took on new trades to survive. Some became midwives, healers, scribes or teachers. Others worked in farms or as caretakers for holy places, and a few are said to have become poets or calligraphers under new names. Their works, unsigned but not forgotten, found their way into mosques and schools, read by people who never knew the weight of the hands that had written them. A month passes, then another. One morning you wake with an idea, a dangerous one. "I want to write it down," you tell him. "What?" "Everything. Our story." He frowns. "What if someone finds it?" You smile. "Then we'll say it's fiction." You begin writing in the evenings, after chores, after dinner, after the quiet has crept back in. You use scraps at first, parchment given by the monks, the margins of old hymnals. Your handwriting is rusty, but the words come. You don't name yourselves, you don't name the palace, but you tell it all. The notes, the laundry codes, the tunnel, the coin, the saffron thread. He reads over your shoulder sometimes, corrects small things, adds a detail you'd forgotten. "Remember the almond? That was from the feast tray, not the kitchen." Here's your scholarly debate. Can stories passed in secret, unsigned, anonymous, folded into footnotes, be trusted as history? Some argue they're embellished, romanticised. Others say they're the truest kind of record because they were never meant to impress, only to survive. Because when you have nothing else, sometimes a story is all that's left to prove you lived. You finish writing one chilly morning just before the sun breaks. You place the final page between the covers of the old harem book. You press the spine shut, and you hide it. Not too well, just enough that someone curious might find it. The first snow comes quiet. A lace of white dusts the monastery roof, rests on the herbs still stubbornly clinging to life, and silvers the world in a way that makes even the stones look like they're holding their breath. You wait to the cold in your lungs, the kind that doesn't burn but settles deep, reminding you that time is still passing. Seasons still move, even when you try to stand still. You pull the blanket tighter and listen to the sounds of the house, the creak of wood as he rolls over beside you, the thump of the dog's tail against the floor, the groan of the shutters shifting in the wind. This is your world now, small, plain and wrapped in the kind of silence you used to crave. But some mornings, like this one, you wonder if silence can become too much. You light a fire and heat a pot of millet, stirring it slow while the sky outside turns silver blue. He joins you, eyes half closed, yawning like a lion. You hand him a bowl without a word, and he takes it without thanks. You don't need manners anymore, just presence, just rhythm. After breakfast, he pulls on his boots and heads to the woodshop. You stay behind to sweep the prayer hall. The monks let you clean in peace, though a few of them leave small gifts by your bucket now and then, figs, dried thyme, once even a feather that glowed gold in the light. No one says much, but you know, they've adopted you. By midday the sky shifts again, and snow begins to fall in earnest. You step outside and tip your face up to the sky. The flakes melt instantly on your skin, but for a moment, you let yourself feel like a child. Not a runaway, not a shadow, just a woman standing in a winter storm remembering what it feels like to be untouched. He finds you like that. Arms open, hair wet with snow. He doesn't say a word, just takes your hand and pulls you under the awning, brushing a flake from your nose with the pad of his thumb. "You'll catch cold," he says. You grin. "I'll survive." Always do. Here's your historical detail. Snow in the Ottoman capital wasn't rare, but it was deeply symbolic. Poets wrote about it as a veil, a covering, a silence that hid sins and softened grief. There are verses written by palace women that compare snow to sleep, to forgetting, to the stillness after heartbreak. For you, snow is something else. It's a proof the world keeps moving, no matter how still you try to become. That night, you both sit by the fire with a bowl of roasted chestnuts. He reads from a book one of the monks lent him, something about stars and the way they move like ships across the sky. You listen, but you're not really hearing the words. Your mind is turning again, that dangerous corner of your thoughts, the one that wonders what else is out there. You ask softly, "Do you ever miss the road?" He raises an eyebrow. "You mean running for our lives?" You chuckle. "Not that part. The motion." He thinks, "Sometimes, but this is better." You look around the little room, the fire, the combs on the shelf, the scarf hanging from the peg. "Is it enough?" you ask. He sets the book down. Is peace ever enough for someone who's never known it?
That question hangs in the air between you.
And here's your fringe fact. There were women in the Empire who disappeared entirely, never recorded in death or life after escape. But sometimes their names would appear generations later in village records or inheritance disputes, often under new names, new identities. Some say they reinvented themselves so completely, even their grandchildren never knew their truth. Others believe they kept it close, telling their stories only in whispers to those they trusted not to write it down. A week passes, then another. One morning, while tending the small plot behind the chapel, you find a stone out of place. It's flat, smooth, almost deliberately set apart from the others. Beneath it, another slip of parchment. No name, no sender. Just another verse. She changed her name and grew roots in the snow, but the garden still remembers her scent. You stare at it for a long time. He reads it over your shoulder, his brow furrowed. "Someone knows you're here," he says. Or, you whisper, "someone wants me to know they were here too." You both sit with that thought for a long while. And here's your scholarly debate. Do we over-romanticize these lost women? Turn them into legends when they were just survivors, tired and terrified and trying to breathe? Some argue the stories we've woven from fragments, scarf threads, poems, strange names and obscure records, are more myth than memory. But others insist that in cultures where official memory failed to preserve the truth, myth was all these women had to live in, not as decoration, but as shelter. You hide the parchment inside the harem book alongside the others. That night you write again. Not a journal, not a confession, just a story. Another version of the same girl. But this time she doesn't run. She builds a house, plants thyme, teaches the dog to stay. He watches you write and says, "Tell her to give herself a name this time." You pause, then you write, "Layla," because you've come to love that name, not because it's real, but because you made it yours. The next morning, a knock at the monastery gate. Not the monks, a girl, 12 maybe, pale, shivering, alone. She asks for food, for warmth. You welcome her in without thinking, but something about the way she stares at you makes the hairs on your neck rise. She sits beside the fire, eats, says thank you, and then she whispers a single word. A name. Your name. Not Layla, the first one. You and he lock eyes. He stands, the dog growls, but the girl doesn't move. She simply says, "They're looking for you." You kneel, steadying your voice. "Who sent you?" She says, "A woman in a green scarf," and you feel the air leave the room. Not fear, recognition. It's starting again, and not the chase, the choice. You let the girl finish her food before you ask anything else. She eats like someone who hasn't in days. Quick bites, guarded, friscondi, watching the door between chews. Her fingers are thin and cold, her lips chapped from wind, and her eyes never quite settle on yours. You offer her more bread and she hesitates, then nods. "No thanks, just action." She's been trained not to trust kindness. You recognise that training. It was yours once. When the bowl is empty and the fire's burned low, you ask again, gently but firmly. "The woman in the green scarf, what did she say?" The girl shrugs like it wasn't important. "Said if I found the lady with silver eyes and a dog that limps, I should say her name. Then wait." You glance at the dog. He lifts his head like he's in on the conversation, then resumes gnawing at the same paw he always does. Half wolf, half prince, still loyal. You wonder what that woman told the girl about you, about your life, about how to find you here, in the middle of a monastery garden where the snow has just begun to melt. "She said you'd know what to do," the girl adds, almost as an afterthought. He's sitting beside you now, hands clasped tight, watching you the way he does when he's already made his decision, but wants to pretend it's still up for discussion. "So," he says, "what do we do?" You don't answer right away. Instead, you take the girl to the guest room, the one with the yellow blanket and the cracked window. You tuck her in, you light a small candle by her bedside. You sing something under your breath. You never thought your voice would remember the old lullaby, but it does. She falls asleep mid-verse. Only then do you go back to the main room and sit across from him. I think we've been found, you say. I think you're right. But not by the palace. He tilts his head. Then by who? You pull the parchment from your sleeve. The one with the verse about the garden, still folded neatly, still heavy with meaning. You lay it on the table between you. Whoever sent this, you whisper, knows exactly who I am, and doesn't want me dead. Otherwise that girl would have come with someone else. He nods slowly. So maybe this isn't a warning. Maybe it's an invitation. Here's your historical detail. Long after their escapes, some concubines were believed to have reconnected with others who had also fled the harem, forming loose, underground circles across the empire. These women weren't trying to return to power, they were building something else. Quiet networks, shared homes, orphan care, literacy projects, protection. Some modern scholars even call them the first informal feminist collectives in Ottoman history, though they had no such name for themselves. They were just women who knew too much and had lost too much to stay silent. He leans back and exhales. Do you want to go to her? You shake your head. I don't even know where she is. He smiles. Then maybe it's her turn to find us. And here's your fringe fact. It was not uncommon in the later centuries of the empire for former palace women to use religious sites, monasteries, dervish lodges, soup kitchens, as meeting points. Some disguised themselves as pilgrims, others as teachers or caretakers. Messages were passed not by messengers but by small acts. A borrowed book, a misfiled scroll, a child with a name that meant something only to the right ears. If you knew what to look for, you could trace an entire web of vanished women, hiding in plain sight. You decide not to run, not this time. Instead, you write a message, not a reply, an offering, a single line of poetry. The bird has built a nest in the bell tower. She sings when the sun forgets to rise. You write it on clean parchment and fold it tightly. The next morning you send it with a spice merchant heading west. A man who stops at every lodge, every village, every monastery. You don't ask who he knows, you just say, if anyone asks for a message from the garden, give them this. He pockets it with a nod and disappears into the fog. You don't speak of it again, and not aloud, not yet. Here's your scholarly debate. Are these verses we've uncovered, these scraps of anonymous poetry and cryptic references, actually part of a larger story? Or are we just trying to connect dots that were never meant to be joined? Some historians argue that attributing purpose to scattered verses is wishful thinking. Others believe that's exactly how oppressed people survived, through code, through metaphor, through messages that looked meaningless to everyone except the person they were meant for. Weeks pass, the snow thaws, the girl stays. You learn her name is Zara. You learn she likes sweet figs and refuses to wear shoes unless absolutely necessary. She doesn't say much about where she came from. You don't ask. She's clearly been passed from hand to hand, and now she's here. Dirty, brittle, sharp-eyed and silent. You teach her to read. He teaches her how to carve spoons. The dog teaches her how to share without being asked. Spring comes fast, pushing through the frozen ground like it's been holding its breath all winter. Flowers bloom without permission. The hills go green overnight. And with the thaw comes movement. Travellers on the road again, monks returning from distant cities, merchants carrying rumours like pollen on the wind. You hear whispers. A woman building a house for runaways in the hills beyond Erzurum. A girl who used to serve the Valide Sultan, now helping sick women in Edirne. A poet with no name whose verses speak of locked doors and unlocked hearts. You hear enough to know that you're not alone, that you are never alone. One evening Zara brings you something from the monastery gate. A package, wrapped in soft linen. No name. Inside a green scarf. Familiar. Wrapped inside it, a wooden comb carved with a tulip. Not the one you lost. A new one. And tucked inside the teeth of the comb, a tiny folded square of paper. It says, "You were never the only one who ran. You were just the first to leave a trail. You press it to your lips. He stands beside you and asks, 'Is it time?' You nod. Almost. Not because you're ready to run again, but because the time for hiding may finally be over." The monastery's bell rings slower in the spring. The sound doesn't carry as far when the air thickens with pollen and bird chatter, and you find yourself waiting for its call to mark your days. You begin measuring time not by fear, not even by chores, but by rhythms. When the lavender blooms, when the dog sheds half his fur in lazy tufts, When Zara learns her first full sentence and insists on saying it 10 different ways just to see how it sounds coming out of her mouth, you start to feel settled. But the letter in the scarf won't leave you. You reread it every night, not because it says much, but because of what it implies. You were just the first to leave a trail. That phrase turns over in your mind like a smooth stone. You used to think your escape was singular, a miracle even. But now you wonder how many women have done the same, how many chose silence instead of stories, burial instead of books, and how many like you decided one day to speak. The idea simmers, grows. You begin writing again, not poetry, not this time with guides and instructions. You write in the margins of the harem book, curling your letters between lines of forgotten verses. You write about hiding messages in laundry, about the soft language of scarf knots and coffee grounds, about how to walk without being followed. You write about risk, about trust, about what it costs to become someone else. He watches you, doesn't question it, just hands you more ink. Zara helps sometimes, practicing her pen strokes in the corners. The pages begin to fill. Here's your historical detail. While we have fragments of advice written by women from the harem on etiquette, healing and religion, nothing survives that resembles a survival manual. But oral traditions hint at them. Women pass down advice in lullabies, in herbal recipes, in the quiet instructions shared while washing each other's hair. Some scholars believe these traditions were not simply cultural, they were coded systems of survival, adapted and updated through generations. One afternoon, Zara finds a corner of your writing and reads aloud, "If you must run, do not take more than you can carry at a dead sprint." She laughs. "That's dramatic." You grin. "You've never run from a palace guard." She tilts her head. "Maybe I have." You pause. "Have you?" She shrugs. "I don't remember." You let her lie. You remember what it's like to need time before the truth can come out. The monks begin to notice your pages. They don't ask questions, but one of them leaves you a fresh set of quills. Another replaces your ink. They are not blessing your work outright, but they are helping it exist. Zara begins carving patterns into stones. Tulips, moons, the letter L in the old calligraphic style. She leaves them by the well, near the road, on the monastery walls. Silent messages, traces. You don't stop her, it's the same impulse, the same trail. You and he begin to talk late at night about what comes next. "Maybe it's time to leave," he says one evening, voice low. "Why?" you ask. "We're safe here." He looks out the window. "Maybe we're needed somewhere else." You both go quiet, because you know he's right. Here's your fringe fact. In the 18th century, rumours spread of a woman in the eastern mountains of the empire who offered shelter to runaways, not just lovers, anyone who didn't belong. No records verify her identity, no official reports, but her name appears in songs, in curses, in coded references in the journals of travelling scholars. They called her the Lady of the Silence. Some say she was a former harem concubine. Others say she was the daughter of a Sufi mystic. All agree on one thing: she knew how to disappear, and how to help others do the same. You and he begin preparing. Quietly, no ceremony. You inventory what you'll take, just the essentials, the girl, the book, the scarf, the old coin you've carried so long it feels like a second pulse. You plant time in the garden before you go, a last gift, a promise. When it blooms, maybe someone will know you were here. Zara watches you pack. "Where are we going?" she asks. Pause. You meet her eyes. "To find the others." She squints. "What others?" You crouch down. "The ones like us." She's quiet for a while, then nods. That night, before you leave, you write one final page. Not for you, for whoever finds the book next. If you are reading this, you are not the first, and you won't be the last. Find a safe place. Find your name. Then help the next one. You wrap the harem book in green cloth. You tuck it into the rafters, where the birds nest. He helps you seal it with wax. Here's your scholarly debate. Some believe women like you vanished because they were erased, swallowed by history, too quiet to leave proof. Others believe they didn't vanish at all, that they became part of the empire's hidden architecture. The midwives, the innkeepers, the teachers, the storytellers, that they passed their knowledge not through official documents, but through scraps and verses, through stone carvings and whispered warnings. And if you follow the trail long enough, you find them. Not in the archives, in the margins, You leave before sunrise, no one stops you. The monks nod farewell. One hands you a bundle of dates. Another slips a stone into your palm, shaped like a crescent carved with a tulip. Zara walks between you, scarf tied tight, steps confident. The dog leads. You walk down the old road with the sun at your back, not running, not hiding, just continuing the trail. The road east is gentler than you remember. Or maybe you're just stronger now, bones less startled by walking, mind less burdened by uncertainty. You follow a path that curves along the edge of a dried riverbed, the kind that probably roared once but now whispers in dust. Wild rosemary dots the trail, and Zara keeps stopping to press sprigs into her pockets until she smells like a garden that wandered off from someone's kitchen. The dog chases shadows and stares down every bird. He hasn't barked once. You think he understands the need for quiet now. You don't speak much on the first day. The rhythms of walking is enough. Every now and then he hums a line from a song you both once knew. You don't join in, you just let it circle around you, like warmth coming in from the side. Zara sings under her breath, something rhythmic and old, maybe a lullaby, maybe something she made up. She won't say where she learned it, and you don't push. Some things stay folded inside a person, like letters with no address. By nightfall you find an abandoned farmhouse. Stone walls half fallen in, no roof, but enough shelter to keep the cold off. You build a fire and eat the dates the monks gave you, washed down with the rainwater caught in a shallow rock. Zara sits cross-legged near the flames, toying with the bone-handled knife he gave her for safety. She hasn't used it yet. You hope she never has to. Before bed he asks, "Do you think we're close?" You shake your head. "We'll know when we are." You dream that night of tulips blooming in snow. You wake with the image still pressed against your eyelids, the scent of silk and steam lingering in your throat like a memory you didn't summon. Here's your historical detail. The eastern mountains of the Ottoman Empire were vast and wild, lightly governed and often home to outcasts and mystics. These regions, stretching across what is now eastern Turkey and parts of the Caucasus, offered natural refuge. There are scattered references in travel journals to invisible settlements, places that didn't appear on maps but were known through rumour, highland hamlets with no formal allegiance, no registered headman, and a reputation for turning strangers into locals with a handshake and a bowl of lentils. You keep walking. Each village you pass through has its own rhythm. Some are suspicious, eyes following you from behind shuttered windows, men who speak only in single-syllable grunts. Others are warm in that way only the forgotten places are, full of people too busy surviving to ask where you came from. In one, an old woman trades you a goatskin of milk for 2 verses. In another, a man insists you take his daughter's spare shoes because they match your fire. You don't know what that means, but you say thank you and take the shoes. You leave no real trace, but small ones, always. A tulip etched into a windowsill, a poem carved into soft bark, a circle of stones arranged just so. Each night you add more to the book you started rewriting on the road. What you remember, what you learn, what you wish you'd known when you first escaped. Zara watches you write. Sometimes she copies the shapes of your letters in the dirt. Other times she asks, "Who's it for?" And you answer, "Whoever comes next." Here's your fringe fact. In the Ottoman world there existed a tradition called kitab-ı-fal, books of divination. Often passed hand to hand, these were filled with riddles, coded sayings, and poetic fragments meant to guide the reader's fate. Some believe women created their own versions in secret, blending fortune-telling with practical advice, wrapping survival tips in metaphor to avoid suspicion. None of these have been officially archived, but bits and pieces turn up in unexpected places, hidden inside bindings, tucked behind calligraphy, sewn into the hems of robes. You begin to feel it, that pull in the air, the sense of being near something, not visible but waiting. On the 12th day you reach a high ridge overlooking a valley, stitched with goat trails and low brush. From here the world looks half-formed, as if the Sultan himself had gotten tired of designing it. No domes, no arches, just rock, wind and sky. Zara runs ahead, arms out like wings. She spins until she falls into the grass and laughs for the first time in days. He sits beside you on the slope. This could be it. You nod. If it isn't, it's close. You descend into the valley. Not all at once, carefully, slowly, the way you approach anything precious. You stop at every hut, every door. You look for signs, a green scarf drying on a line, a tulip painted on a shutter, a child with an accent from the palace kitchens. Nothing obvious. Until a boy, no older than 8, runs past you, barefoot and bold, yelling in Arabic, "The sparrow sings in the bell tower." He's just playing, shouting nonsense. But your body locks up, because that line, that was yours. Your poem, from the message you sent with the spice merchant months ago. You and he freeze. Zara doesn't notice, she's too busy collecting pine cones. You follow the boy. He vanishes into a house built of clay and stone, its door half open, its window shuttered. Inside, there's a smell of cumin and wet wool. A woman sits by the hearth, back turned, weaving something on a small hand loom. She doesn't look up, she just says, "You're late." Your throat tightens. "You knew I'd come." She smiles without turning. "You left a trail, every tulip, every verse, every girl you didn't ignore." Zara stands behind you, eyes wide. The woman finally looks up. She's older than you, younger than you'd expected. A scar runs down her cheek, pale against her dark skin. Her eyes are soft, knowing, tired. She nods once and then says, "Welcome home. Here's your scholarly debate. Is it possible that a network like this really existed? A hidden lineage of women who had once been enslaved, discarded or forgotten, now building something together in the unrecorded corners of empire? Some say it's wishful fiction, revisionist fantasy. Others argue it's not only possible but inevitable. That survival, when shared, becomes structure. That the empire's silences are loudest where its women lived. You don't argue either way. You just step inside. Because for the first time since you ran, you're not hiding. You're arriving. The house is nothing like the palace, and thank God for that. There are no velvet curtains, no polished floors, no gilded mirrors reflecting a version of yourself shaped by other people's desires. Here, the light is real, thin and dusty through reed shutters, and the floor is covered in old rugs that don't match, some with holes worn into the corners. The hearth is black with use. The windows don't close properly. It smells like ash and lentils and wool. It is perfect. The woman with the scar says her name is Halima. She doesn't ask yours. She just makes room for you and your little group like she's been waiting since last summer. She clears a bench for Zara, lays out a bowl of stew for the dog, and nods toward a low shelf in the corner. "You can sleep there," she says. "It's warmer than it looks." Then she goes back to weaving, as if a family of fugitives hasn't just walked through her door. You don't say much at first. Your words are stiff from months of use only in whispers. He stays close, sitting in the doorway with one leg out like he's still not sure if this is real. Zara, meanwhile, is already halfway into the stew pot, licking her fingers with no shame. Halima hums while she works, and every now and then a second voice hums along, an echo from a room you haven't seen yet. There are more people here. You can feel it. You just don't know how many. That night she lights a single oil lamp and speaks without looking up. "There are others," she says. "Not here, not in this house, but in the valley. Some stay, some move on. We don't ask where they came from, we only ask what they can do." You say nothing, just nod. She looks at you for the first time in a while, those soft, heavy-lidded eyes measuring your silence. "You can write," she says. You blink. "How?" "The message you sent," she replies. "The verse. I've seen that hand before. A tutor once told me it was palace style. Straight spine, long tail. You feel your stomach twist. You were in the palace?" She smiles. "Once." She doesn't elaborate. You don't press. Here's your historical detail. Women from the Ottoman Harem, particularly those who had been trained as concubines or ladies-in-waiting, were among the most educated women in the empire. Many were multilingual, skilled in poetry, calligraphy, music, and even basic medicine. When they escaped or were retired, they sometimes became midwives, private tutors, or calligraphers. Their knowledge became their livelihood, if they could keep it hidden behind a new name. Halima sets a woven bundle on the table, inside a pile of folded letters. Messages, she says, from others, sometimes instructions, sometimes warnings, sometimes just poetry. You pick one at random, the paper is thin and pale blue, folded into a star. It reads, "I kept the rose, even when the garden burned." You feel tears sting, fast and unexpected. He reads over your shoulder, says nothing, just puts a hand on your back. That night you sleep without dreams, not because you feel safety, but because your mind, for once, isn't trying to claw its way out of your body. The next morning, Halima puts you to work. You're not guests, she says. You're part of this now. You and he dig irrigation channels for the herbs. Zara feeds chickens and keeps trying to name them. The dog finally accepts this new place as territory and starts pacing the perimeter like he owns the whole damn valley. You learn the rhythm fast. Work at sunrise, letters after lunch, discussion at night, because yes, there are others. They come in one by one, thin women with tired hands, an old eunuch with a burn on his neck, a boy with a coin sewn into his hatband. You don't ask their stories and they don't offer them, but they come, and they stay, and there they add to the letters and the books and the signals carved into the trees at the edge of the valley. Here's your fringe fact. In the Ottoman era, eunuchs who served in the palace were sometimes released or escaped and vanished into private life. Rarely do they appear again in records, but rumours persist of a few who aided in the relocation of escaped concubines, particularly those fleeing not only the harem, but dangerous political entanglements. One anonymous account in a Jesuit diary describes a man of the court, neither man nor ghost, who smuggled women from marble halls to mountain snow. You begin compiling everything. Your writing, Halime's letters, the old verses, the instructions passed from one woman to another by way of stone and thread. The pile becomes a second book, a new one. It has no title yet, no signature, but it's growing. One night Halime pulls you aside, just the two of you near the herb beds under a sky full of moon silver. We're not hiding anymore, she says. We're building something. You nod, but she shakes her head. Not like you think. This isn't just refuge, it's education. It's subversion. You furrow your brow. A school? No, she says. A seed. You stare at her. Then you understand, because what's growing here isn't just safety. It's legacy. Here's your scholarly debate. Is it fair to call these movements resistance? They weren't organised armies or political fronts. They didn't make declarations, but they challenged the empire in quieter ways, by refusing to disappear, by teaching literacy to girls, by hiding the lost and making sure their stories got written down. Some say that's not resistance. Others say it's the only kind that lasts. You watch Zara fall asleep beside the fire that night, cheeks smudged with ash, a tulip drawn on her palm in charcoal. You whisper to him, "What if we were meant to find this place all along?" He smiles. "We didn't find it," he says. "We built it." A month passes before you notice the stars are different. It happens slowly. First the evening air grows warmer, then a new shape appears in the sky. Not a star exactly, but a movement. A soft flicker that reminds you of the way palace lanterns used to shimmer across polished marble. You lie in the grass beside the house one night, Zara snoring lightly on your shoulder, and you stare up into that velvet sky. He's beside you, one hand behind his head, the other idly tracing circles on your sleeve. "It's changing," you murmur. He doesn't ask what. He sees it too. It begins with the arrival of a stranger, not unusual here, where everyone arrives from somewhere else. But this one is different. He comes at dusk, walking with a slight limp, dressed like a spice merchant but carrying no spices. His only luggage is a satchel heavy with paper. When Halime opens the door, he hands her a folded cloth with the tulip symbol embroidered in silver thread. She reads the cloth like it's a map. "From Galata," he says simply. You sit up straighter at the word, Galata. The name swirls with meaning. Old, layered, dangerous. The district in Istanbul where merchants, mystics and spies cross paths like waves. You haven't thought about it in months, maybe longer. But hearing it now, it's like hearing your own name whispered by someone who's not supposed to know it. Halima turns to you. It's time. You blink. Time for what? For you to send someone back. You stare at her. Back where? To the cities, she says. To the places you left behind. It's not enough to escape. You must leave doors open behind you. You think she's joking. She's not. That night she brings you a star map. An actual one. Parchment rolled tightly, hand-painted, marked with notes in 3 languages. You unroll it by candlelight, eyes scanning the strange names. Aries, Sagittarius, Libra. The stars have never meant much to you before, just cold light scattered across your memories. But now the map pulses with a kind of urgency. Halime points to a constellation shaped like an eye. We use this to time the letters. This, she says, pointing to another cluster, tells us when to send new names. And this, she taps a star that looks like it's falling. This is when we move. You laugh. That's superstition. She smirks. It's rhythm. Here's your historical detail. Astrology held a respected place in the Ottoman world, not as mere fortune-telling, but as a form of court science. Imperial astrologers advised sultans on everything from battles to marriages. But outside the palace, astrology became a subtle language of its own. Women in particular used the stars to mark timing for rituals, travel, and even rebellion. Star maps were sometimes hidden inside prayer books or embroidered into robes, not for protection, but as guides for when to act. Over the next few days, the valley comes alive with motion. Messages are written in invisible ink, folded into song lyrics, tucked into the bindings of old Qurans. Women practice code phrases, harmless lines like, "Have you seen the blue pomegranate?" or "My aunt weaves with 9 reeds." Each one means something else entirely. You teach Zara to recite poems backward, to memorize names she doesn't understand, to walk like she's on an errand when she's actually being followed. It's not fear driving this, it's preparation. Because the next phase isn't about hiding, it's about reaching. And here's your fringe fact. Ottoman love letters, especially those passed between forbidden partners, often used astrological terms as secret codes. A line like "My moon rises only when you cross my horizon" might simply sound poetic, but to the right reader it gave a time, a location, and an intent. Women trained in the palace were often taught this technique under the guise of poetic education. Later they repurposed it for survival. One night the man from Galata unrolls a map of the empire across the floor. He uses pebbles to mark points. Bursa, Izmir, Damascus, Sarajevo. Cities where threads are unravelling and could use a little careful weaving. He taps Galata last. "We need someone to go back," he says. You stare at the mark. "Not to stay," he adds, "just to listen. Just to carry the thread. You should say no, it's reckless, risky, mad. But part of you wants to see it again, the minarets rising like spears, the Bosphorus gleaming like a mirror under the moon. The place you once thought you'd never escape." He speaks before you do. "I'll go." Your head whips toward him. "What?" "You've done enough," he says. "Let me be the one." But Halime is shaking her head. "You're too known, too marked. But her? She was a shadow even when she lived in the palace. She can pass again." You want to protest, but something stops you, because deep down you know she's right. Here's your scholarly debate. Did any escaped concubines ever return, willingly or otherwise, to the palace cities? Most historians believe not, but there are odd gaps in palace records. Unnamed women who appear briefly in police files and vanish again, usually around uprisings or mysterious fires. Some argue these were spies, others saboteurs, and some romantic fools. But what if they were messengers? Seeds returning to the wind. You pack quietly, not much, your scarf, your book, a hidden knife. He doesn't say anything, just helps you tighten your belt. Zara draws a tulip on your hand in ash. "For luck," she whispers. You kiss her hair, then you go. Halime walks you to the edge of the valley. She presses something into your hand before turning away. It's a star map, folded into a square, written in your own hand from a lifetime ago. The road back feels different than the road away. You thought it would sting, that every curve would echo with old terror, every village whisper with your name, but the air has changed. Or maybe you have. You walk like a woman with a destination now, not a desperation. The scarf around your neck is no longer for hiding, but for signalling. You are not pretending to be invisible. You are choosing when and how to be seen. The man from Galata travels with you for the first stretch, quiet and watchful. He doesn't speak much unless it's important. Directions, timing, the occasional warning. At night, he draws diagrams in the dirt. Signal marks, passphrases, safe places. If you see a door with 3 shoes by the threshold and a pomegranate carved above it, that's a safe house, he tells you. But only if the 3rd shoe is tied with a red string. You nod, memorizing everything. One night you sit under an almond tree, nursing blistered feet while he recounts how he first got involved. A sister who disappeared. A woman he loved. Taken. A promise he never meant to keep that turned into his life's work. You don't press for more. The stories always come out sideways in people like you. Not through confession, through hints and metaphors, through the way a voice cracks on certain names. He parts ways with you at a crossroads near Ankara. From here, he says, you go alone. You'll draw less suspicion. He hands you a letter sealed in wax, its envelope marked only with a single silver tulip. Deliver this to the astrologer's apprentice in Galata. He'll know what to do. You fold it into your sash, nod once, and step into the next phase. Galata takes 3 more days. When you first glimpse the towers rising above the curve of the Bosphorus like needles piercing the sky, you feel your chest tighten. Not in fear, in awe. You never thought you'd see it again. The city buzzes as always, merchants yelling, donkeys braying, the rhythmic knock of looms and hammering of copper bowls. You disappear into it easily. The palace girls were trained to blend, to dazzle, yes, but also to vanish. Here's your historical detail. Galata, during the Ottoman era, was more than a trading hub. It was a collision point. Greek, Armenian, Jewish, Arab, Venetian and French influences jostled together in its markets and alleys. It was known for its cafes, brothels, spies and artists. If something illicit was being whispered, it likely passed through Galata first. And many stories of escaped concubines suggest this district was their best chance at vanishing or re-emerging. You rent a room above a laundry shop. It smells like steam and wet cotton, but it's clean and close to the astrologer's quarter. You pose as a widow, recently arrived to seek work as a reader or scribe. No one questions it. In this city, everyone's story is a little too smooth to be real. The apprentice finds you before you find him. He's barely 20, with ink-stained hands and a habit of blinking too fast when nervous. He sits across from you at a cafe one evening and says, without looking up, "I believe you have something for me." You cite him the envelope under the table. He doesn't open it, just slips it into his robe and says, "Welcome home." You want to laugh. Is that what this is? Not yet, he replies, but it could be. He gestures for you to follow. He leads you through winding alleys and into a modest stone building near the docks. Inside is a room filled with shelves, wooden, crooked, overflowing with books and scrolls and loose papers tied with twine. Women move between the stacks, not like librarians, but like field surgeons. One nods at you, another smiles. A third, older than any you've seen in this network so far, hands you a blank page and a quill. No titles, she says, just write what you wish someone had told you before you ran. And here's your fringe fact. Among the lesser-known artefacts in Ottoman-era archives are untitled journals, some written in the margins of religious texts, others hidden inside ledgers or beneath false covers. Many contain passages that read like survival guides for women. While unattributed, their tone and content suggest they were written by individuals with intimate knowledge of the palace. Scholars now believe these may have been the earliest covert manuals for escaping or navigating imperial systems. You take a deep breath and write. You write about the laundry codes, the coin, the saffron thread, the fabric fan language, the chessboard signals, the eunuch who winked instead of warning you, the girl who gave you bread when no one else would. You write it all. The apprentice reads over your shoulder when you pause. "You're not the first," he says. "I hope I'm not the last," you reply. Over the next week you help sort the collection. You find fragments of poems you recognise from Helime's hut. You find a scarf with stitching identical to one you lost years ago. You find a drawing of a girl with silver eyes and a tulip tucked behind her ear. You find echoes of yourself in 100 different places and realise how vast this trail has become. Here's your scholarly debate. Do these fragments constitute a history or merely a myth in the making? Some argue that unless something was sanctioned, written with imperial ink, logged by a scribe, it doesn't count. But others insist that marginalised people have always built their own records, not in official halls, but in shadow libraries, shared symbols, oral lore. If it was remembered, it was real. If it was passed on, it mattered. On your final day in the city, the apprentice hands you a new map. Hand-drawn, not of stars, but of places. Villages, safe houses, crossroads, hidden doors. "Take it," he says. "Someone out there is waiting to be found." You nod, fold the map, wrap it in the same green scarf, and vanish into the crowd once more. This time not fleeing, this time returning to the road not as a runner, but as a guide. The road back doesn't feel like a return, it feels like expansion. Like the edges of your world are stretching outward, no longer defined by fear or distance, but by the thin golden thread of connection you now know exists between every woman who has ever had to flee and every woman who dared to leave a map behind. You are no longer tracing a path. You are drawing it as you walk. The streets of Galata fade behind you as the land opens up again. Rolling hills, wind-whipped plains, olive trees gnarled, like stories told too many times. You keep the scarf tied around your neck, not to hide your face but to show your colours. The old green of the harem now made into something else. Something freer. You take the long way back, just as the apprentice told you. Avoid the main roads, pass through the villages where no one bothers to look twice at a woman with strong boots and a satchel full of paper. In one small town nestled in a bowl of fig trees, you slip a copy of your guidebook beneath a loose floorboard in the bakery, marked with a tulip drawn in charcoal. In another, you give a folded poem to a merchant's wife whose eyes are too tired for her young face. You say only, "Keep this, one day someone will ask you for it." And then you move on. Each stop becomes a new page in a book that has no beginning, no ending. Just chapters written by different hands in different languages, held together by belief. In a hillside village dusted with rosemary, you find a woman with burn scars on both wrists and a voice that cracks on every sentence. She doesn't ask where you're from, she just offers tea and says, "I was told you might pass through." You stay the night. Before dawn, she gives you a packet of herbs wrapped in linen. "For the girl with the tulip on her hand," she says. You smile, knowing she means Zara. She's been remembered. Here's your historical detail. Ottoman communication networks didn't just run through official channels. They travelled by trade, pilgrimage, and song. Women in particular used informal systems of knowledge sharing. Songs that carried hidden meanings, weaving patterns that encoded messages, and medicinal recipes passed between generations as both healing and metaphor. What looked like folklore to outsiders was, in fact, a living archive. As the land begins to rise again and the trees give way to rock and cold wind, you know you're nearing the valley. You smell it first, smoke, thyme, the sharp tang of goat's milk on the wind. Then the familiar curve of the mountain slope, the hidden trail only visible if you already know where to look. And suddenly there it is, home. If you can call it that. Because it's not the same place you left, it's bigger. The garden has doubled in size. The outer stone wall has been mended. There are new faces, women, children, even a few older men, people who weren't here before, their clothes stitched with tulips, stars and other signals you now understand. Zara runs to meet you, taller than you remember, hair tied with twine, a wooden spoon tucked into her belt like a weapon. "I taught the goat to stop biting," she says proudly. You laugh. "Good. Did you teach it to read?" "Not yet," she grins. He's there too, watching from the edge of the herb beds. He doesn't say anything, just meets your eyes and nods, that quiet way of his that says you came back and you don't have to explain. Halim waits at the gate, arms crossed, the same crooked smile on her lips. "You were gone longer than planned," she says. "I had more to deliver than I thought." She glances at your satchel. "And more to bring back." You nod, then open it. Inside, poems, maps, symbols, a worn comb, a stitched scarf, a message from the astrologer's apprentice. A new guidebook with instructions you wrote while watching the sun set over the Galata rooftops. And here's your fringe fact. In some border regions of the Ottoman Empire, women's textiles, quilts, shawls, veils, were used as living documents. They were passed down and altered, each owner adding a new symbol, a new thread, a new meaning. Some were so densely coded that only women of a certain lineage could read them properly. Historians still argue whether these were decorative, ceremonial, or something else entirely. But women like you would know. They were records. You spend the next few days recovering, resting, telling stories by the fire. Zara insists you recount every stop, every message, every safe house. At some point you show her the folded star map. She points to one of the constellations. "What's that one called?" You smile. "That's where you go when you're lost." "What if I'm not lost?" "Then you help the ones who are." She grins. "Then that's my favourite." At night, you reread the letters you've collected. One stands out, a short, delicate note written on the back of a torn cloth inventory. "I was never taught to read, but I learned to listen. Your silence made me brave, and you don't know who wrote it. But you place it beside your own letter in the growing archive Halime has started storing beneath the floorboards. No signature, no title, just truth. Here's your scholarly debate. Is this kind of history, fragmented, secret, undocumented, really part of the Empire's legacy? Some say no, that without names and dates it's not real, but others argue that these fragments tell us more about the everyday empire than the grand battles and decrees ever could. They show us how power was survived, how systems were subverted from the inside, how women built entire worlds in the margins, then handed each other the blueprints one tulip at a time. That night you sit with Halime under the stars. She points upward. You see that? You squint. A faint shimmer. A meteor, maybe. They say that's the tail of a bird who escaped heaven, she says. What kind of bird? One who didn't want to sing on command. You both watch the sky for a while, and then she says, There's another village in the north. I think it's time they heard your story. You don't answer right away, but when you do, it's with a smile. I'll leave at sunrise. You leave at first light again, but this time there's no dread. No scraping knot of fear clawing at your stomach. No voice in the back of your mind whispering run faster or die slower. Just birdsong, warm bread in your pack, and Zara waving from the ridge with her wooden spoon raised like a flag. The dog howls once, not a cry of longing, but ceremony. You laugh to yourself. You've left before, but not like this. This is not escape. This is expansion, continuation. A vein branching outward to carry new blood, new stories, new names. The village in the north takes 3 days to reach. Hills get steeper, air thinner, and the path twists through cedar groves and old pomegranate orchards that still bear fruit even though their trunks are scarred and split. You sleep in a grove one night, beneath trees that hum with night creatures. You wake with dew on your scarf and the clear sense that something or someone is watching. When you arrive, it's barely a village, more like a cluster of homes clinging to a slope, each one shaped by the wind and smoke stained by years of fires tended by women who've seen more than they'll ever say. You walk in like you belong because you do now. No one questions the scarf or the satchel. A woman sitting on a low stool mending a basket glances at your boots and says, Been walking long? You nod. She points to a hut with a crooked chimney. She'll be expecting you. You don't ask who she is, you've learned not to. The woman who opens the door is blind in one eye and walks with a cane, but there's nothing hesitant about her. She pulls you inside like you're a cousin, returned from the market, and says, You're later than I thought. Her house smells of juniper and ink. She shows you to a low stool and hands you a cup of something sharp and hot. Tell me what you brought. You set down your satchel and begin laying it all out, poems, messages, maps. She examines each like she's feeling for heat, flipping pages, sniffing parchment, rubbing threads between her fingers. When she finds the verse about the sparrow and the bell tower, her lips twitch. I remember when that line first travelled this way, she says, carried by a girl with a broken sandal and a voice like water over stone. You don't know who she means, but you don't ask, because it doesn't matter. These stories don't belong to people anymore. They belong to the network. Here's your historical detail. In parts of the Ottoman Empire, Sufi lodges, or tekkes, offered refuge to travellers, poets and women with nowhere else to go. While often seen as purely spiritual institutions, many lodges, especially those in remote regions, functioned as unofficial safe houses. Some historians believe they served as crossroads for message runners and smugglers, masked by the religious legitimacy. Women, particularly those who'd been educated in palaces or courts, sometimes found shelter among these mystics, offering services in exchange for anonymity. That night, the woman lights a lamp carved with a crescent and a tulip. She opens a chest beneath the floor and pulls out bundles, letters, scarves, tokens. We've been waiting for a new archive, she says. Ours is full. You sit cross-legged beside her and begin sorting. Some messages are decades old. One, written in violet ink, is signed only the girl who used to sing for the vizier's wives. Another is stitched into the hem of a veil, tiny letters, nearly illegible, but still there. The key is always under the second stone. You don't ask what it means, you just copy it down. The next morning she walks you to the edge of the village and hands you a slip of fabric rolled tight and sealed with beeswax. Deliver this to the next woman who speaks to you in the proverbs, she says. You raise an eyebrow. What kind of proverbs? She grins. You'll know. You tuck it into your scarf. And here's your fringe fact. Some Ottoman women communicated through what scholars now call folk encryption, using well-known idioms and proverbs to mask precise meanings. A phrase like the cat sees through silk might refer to surveillance, while don't water the tulip twice could mean don't send the same message twice. These sayings passed as harmless conversation to eavesdroppers, but signalled action or caution within the network. You leave with a new list of names, some drawn in symbols, others marked only by place: the widow near the salt road, the midwife who sings to the stove, the girl with the 2 silver combs. You head west, tracing the same roads the Empire once used to move silk, taxes, and soldiers. Now they carry something softer, stranger, stories, resistance wrapped in rhyme. You stop in tea houses and watch for the signs. In one, a woman taps the table 3 times before asking for lemon. In another, a boy draws a tulip in spilled tea foam and disappears into the kitchen. The network lives. You help where you can. Patch wounds, deliver messages, leave behind pieces of your own writing, verses, instructions, questions. One you write in the back of a prayer book and leave under a stone bench outside a mosque. If you're afraid, good, you're paying attention. If you're alone, you are wrong. Look again. If you are loved, leave a mark behind. You don't sign it. You never sign them anymore, because the words don't belong to you. They belong to the road now. Here's your scholarly debate. Can these kinds of informal knowledge networks be truly traced? Without records, signatures, or structured hierarchy, many argue that these movements vanish into legend, but others suggest that this was the point: to build a resistance so decentralized, so fluid, that it could survive anything. That every fragment, every hint, every whispered proverb was part of a living archive designed not to be seen, but to be felt, to be passed. One evening, weeks into the journey, a girl about Zira's age stops you on the road. She's holding a reed basket and a song on her lips. She asks, "Would you like some time for your soup?" You nod. She hands you a bundle wrapped in linen. Inside, a folded note. No ink. Just a pattern of holes punched into the paper. A code. You don't know what it says yet, but you smile, because someone is still speaking, and someone will listen. You spend that night in a barn with no animals, just hay, a straw mat, and the creak of wind slipping through loose boards. You unfold the linen bundle again, laying the coded note in front of the firelight. The holes punched into the paper aren't random. You can tell by their symmetry, too precise to be mistake, too irregular to be pattern alone. You press the parchment against a copy of one of your old guides, and for a flicker of a moment, something aligns. The holes form words, but not in ink, in absence. The window opens when the fig tree bends east. You read it 3 times before it clicks. A proverb, yes, but it's also an instruction. A time, a place, a direction. You tuck it away, now knowing your next stop isn't a town or a lodge or a person. It's a moment, a confluence, one fig tree facing east, bending with the wind. You've followed stranger maps. At dawn, you head west again, crossing through a canyon where the walls glow rose gold and your footsteps echo back like a ghost trying to finish your sentences. You pass no travellers for hours, just goats and only the occasional hawk circling like it's watching over more than prey. By the second day, you reach a valley thick with fig trees, their wide leaves clapping gently in the wind like hands half-heartedly keeping rhythm. You find it near a bend in the trail. A tree, taller than the rest, its trunk warped slightly east as if reaching towards something just out of reach. You sit beneath it. Wait. By midday, an old man in a straw hat limps down the path, pretending not to notice you. But as he passes, he drops something, a folded cloth pouch, light as air, stitched with a broken tulip and an unblinking eye. He doesn't look back. You open the pouch once you're alone. Inside, a hair comb, 2 dried dates, and a tiny mirror the size of your palm. You run your thumb over the surface, etched faintly on the mirror's back. She sees herself, therefore she is no longer property. You close your hand around it. This is not just a message, this is doctrine. Here's your historical detail. Mirrors, especially handheld ones, held symbolic power in Ottoman society. In the harem, they were both tools of beauty and control, used by women to prepare themselves for inspection, for entertainment, for display. But among poets and mystics, mirrors symbolize self-awareness, rebellion, the reflection of divine truth. Some women reclaimed the mirror, not to see how others saw them, but to remember their own shape after years of being rendered invisible. You keep walking. The next village greets you with suspicion. Guards posted at the edge, not military but makeshift, like men who are told to be ready for something, but not what. You pass by unchallenged, just another traveller with dust on her boots and a neutral expression. but once inside you notice the details. Tulip carvings in the wooden shutters, ribbons tied in sets of 5 along the laundry lines, a woman sweeping her doorstep with a broom that has a coin nailed to the handle. You check into a modest room above a bakery. That night a woman comes with your bread and whispers, "If you need soap, try the north well, the rosemary's bloomed." You nod, though there's no well on the map you carry. You wait until midnight, then follow the path north. It's barely visible under moonlight, but the rosemary is blooming, small pale purple flowers softening the edge of the trail. Eventually, you find the well, just as she said. Inside it, a basket lowered halfway down, caught on a nail. You pull it up, a bundle of letters, more than 2 dozen, wrapped in oilcloth sealed with wax, tied together with the same pattern of knots used in harem laundry codes. You spend the rest of the night in your room, candles flickering, dog-earing names you've heard before, verses you once wrote under a pseudonym. One letter simply says, "We are ready, send the map." And here's your fringe fact. Some scholars now believe that what looked like old postal quirks, pouches dropped down wells, bundles buried beneath herb gardens, scraps of parchment sewn inside bread loaves, were in fact part of a decentralized communication network maintained by women, eunuchs, and sympathetic tradespeople. No official record connects the dots, but in towns and villages across the former empire, elders still remember whispers of a well letter or a fig tree drop. The next morning you leave the village and head into the woods. You find a clearing where the grass has been flattened into patterns, like women dancing or maybe just gathering. You bury a copy of your updated guide beneath a flat stone, mark it with a broken branch and leave. You don't need thanks. You don't even need it to be found tomorrow. One day is enough. You begin to realise the real power of what you're doing isn't in being believed. It's in being useful. That evening in another small town, a boy with a lisp hands you a drawing. It's just a scribble, 2 tulips and what looks like a goat, but on the back is a riddle. She leaves, and still the house is full. You smile, because you've seen this one before. It's a test, a message, a welcome. You've left so many houses behind, some burned, some blessed, some forgotten entirely. And yet, every time you return, there's someone waiting. Someone holding your story, someone shaping it into their own. You are the ghost and the guide, the echo and the answer. Here's your scholarly debate. Can a story that's constantly passed from person to person, edited, reshaped, recited under threat, still be called history? Some academics say no. They argue that oral networks and coded poems are unreliable, prone to exaggeration and myth-making. But others insist that these stories carry a different kind of truth born from survival, from community, from repetition under duress. These aren't distortions, they're mirrors bent to reflect what official memory refuses to show. You rest that night in a stranger's attic. Below you a woman hums while kneading dough. Outside a fig tree bends east, and somewhere another letter is being folded. Another girl is tucking a verse into her sleeve. Another journey is starting. Because now they know the trail exists. Because now they know your story isn't yours alone. By now your feet walk before your mind does. You wake and move like a compass needle chasing the next true direction, guided by instinct, by rhythm, by the hush that falls when someone realizes you are one of them. You no longer think in terms of destination. You think in arrivals, in thresholds, in moments when 2 strangers recognize each other across a crowded room, not by face but by the shape of silence between them. You're on the road again, passing between towns so small they don't appear on maps. Some are just 3 homes and a well, others pretend to be bigger, with signs announcing a post office that hasn't worked in years. But in every one there's something. An unfinished verse scrawled on a bakery wall, a child with a star-shaped pin in her braid, a tailor who leaves your mended hem an inch longer and winks as you leave. The code breathes here. You sleep in barns, on rooftops, in shrine courtyards under the protection of saints whose names you don't know, but whose kindness you feel in your bones. Your dreams are full of birds and paper, and women whose faces shift just as you begin to recognize them. You wake with names on your tongue that don't belong to you. You're not just spreading the guide anymore. You're collecting, harvesting. You meet a woman in a salt town who spins silk from a loom passed down 5 generations. She doesn't speak, but she gives you a shawl embroidered with a crescent and 3 birds. Inside its fringe is a strip of paper that says a silent woman is still a writer. You meet a potter whose glaze is made from ash and bone. He tells you he once sculpted perfume jars for the palace, but now he only makes urns for women who want their ashes scattered without fanfare. You leave him a poem folded inside a broken teacup. You know he'll find it eventually. And here's your historical detail. The empire's outskirts were full of artisans, potters, weavers, metalworkers, whose skills traced directly back to palace industries. Many were once enslaved workers or servants who'd been cast out or freed. Over generations, they adapted their craft into quiet resistance. A tulip handle here, a secret verse etched under a bowl. They carried the language of the court in their fingers, even after their tongues had forgotten it. One evening, on the shore of a wind-whipped lake, you meet her. She's sitting by herself facing the water, scarf flapping like a sail behind her. Her hands are stained with ink, and her back is straight in the way palace tutors used to demand. You sit beside her without speaking. You both wait. Eventually she says, "I memorised your verse about the sparrow." You say, "I didn't think anyone would." She smiles. "I waited years for someone to write something that wasn't meant to be beautiful." You look at her. What was it meant to be? True. The next morning she walks with you. Doesn't ask where you're going. Doesn't care. She just walks. And when you reach the next village, she disappears without goodbye. But that night, you find a note tucked in your shawl. "I will start a lodge in the West, the kind that teaches girls to listen and boys to read signs they weren't taught to see." You fold it carefully and place it in your satchel. By now, the satchel is heavy. Not with weight, but with responsibility. These stories, these scraps, these promises, they're not yours to keep. They're seeds, and every step you take scatters another. Here's your fringe fact. Some Ottoman Sufi lodges accepted women secretly, not just as attendees, but as spiritual leaders, educators, even informants. These women took on ritual names and were often hidden behind layers of myth or mistaken identity. Their teachings blended mysticism, ethics, and social codes. And some believe they passed messages to the resistance networks not just in writing, but in the very way they performed their rituals. A raised hand, a pause in prayer, a changed syllable, each one a signal. You enter a city finally, one of the bigger ones. Not Istanbul, but close. It's loud, crowded, merciless. People jostle past you, shouting about bread prices and sick camels. You make your way through the din until you reach a courtyard market humming with heat and incense. In the corner, a tea stall with no name. You sit. Order cardamom. The server is old but quick. He sets down your glass with a clink and whispers, "The girl with the tulip comb stopped here yesterday. She left something for you." You look up, but he's already gone. Beneath your cup, a folded scrap of parchment softened with wear. It reads, "You can't follow every thread, but you can teach others to weave." You almost laugh, because it's true, you can't do this forever, but you can't stop either. So you find a quiet room above the market, and for 3 days you write. Not poetry and not fragments, not a letter for one woman only, but a book, a new book. You write it plainly, carefully, like a map that isn't one. It explains how to use scarves to send messages, how to twist a proverb into a warning, how to trace names with nut oil that only appear when the paper is held to heat, how to disappear without being gone, and how to find each other even when the Empire forgets you. You finish the book at dawn, wrap it in linen, mark the corner with a tulip and a crescent, then hide it inside a jar of dried figs and give it to the same tea seller who brought your message. "Deliver this to the valley," you say. He just nods. No questions. That evening you stand at the edge of the city, watching the stars come out. You whisper one line to no one. "This time I won't be the one returning." Here's your scholarly debate. Is it possible for movements like this, unwritten, unsanctioned, led by the unrecorded, to persist through generations? Many historians say no. Without structure, without funding, without central leadership, they dissolve. But others argue they persist precisely because they resist form, because they refuse to name a leader, because they know the centre is always the most vulnerable part. So they remain edges, whisper networks, living archives with no index, and that is why they endure. You step into the night. No longer a messenger, no longer a fugitive, Just a woman walking into the dark, leaving light behind. You don't remember the first time you heard the word disappear used like a compliment. Maybe it was in the palace, when a concubine slipped through a hallway unseen, or when a servant replaced an entire tray of wine without a single sound. Back then, vanishing was survival. Now, it's strategy. Now it's sacred. You've made disappearing into an art, a science, a gift passed down like a lullaby or a family recipe. But as you move deeper into the interior of the empire, skirting major roads and ducking past gendarme stations, you realise something else. Disappearing doesn't mean being gone. It means becoming part of something larger, something too vast to see all at once. You no longer carry maps. The paths live in you now, in your hands, your feet, your scent, memory of burnt coffee and jasmine soap. Every woman you meet has a question in her eyes, and now you know how to answer without speaking. In one village, you share a room with a weaver who never learned to read but speaks in colours. Yellow for warning, green for safety, red for run now. She shows you how to thread copper into fabric so it sings when someone enters out a room. In another, a mute midwife presses an amulet into your hand and says nothing, but the cord around it is tied in the harem's triple knot. You sleep with it under your pillow and dream of palace corridors turned to rivers, water flooding silk rugs, and tiny boats made from torn poetry. You wake with tears in your eyes and a renewed hunger, not for revenge, not for escape, but for continuity. The world you left behind wasn't just corrupt, it was incomplete. It didn't know how to hold the fullness of your story. Now, every step you take helps carve out that missing space. You're older now. Not much in years, maybe, but time bends when you live between the margins. Your face is more angular, your voice slower. People listen when you speak, not because you're loud, but because you're rare, like an echo that carries further than it should. Here's your historical detail. The Ottoman Empire kept exhaustive records, tax rolls, population lists, marriage logs. But for every woman who disappeared into a valley or changed her name at a border, there is a gap. A silence. Historians have found entire periods where hundreds of women simply vanished from records after leaving imperial service. Some say they died. Others believe they became something else. Names turned into networks. Lives transformed into lessons whispered down through generations. You arrive in a mountain town where the air smells like iron and moss. There's no obvious signal here. No tulips, no code phrases, just silence. The townspeople look at you as if they're trying to decide whether you're real. Then a girl, not more than 9, runs up and presses a peach into your hand. Her eyes say, "Go left at the fountain." You do. Behind the fountain is a storage shed, and beneath that, stairs. You descend into a stone room lined with shelves. Books, letters, scarves, keepsakes, the underground archive. Halime told you once it might exist, but you didn't think you'd find it. There's a woman down there too, sitting at a desk bent over a scroll. She doesn't look up right away. Then, as if sensing you, she glances up and says, "I was hoping it would be you." You sit beside her. You lay your latest messages on the table. She hands you tea. Neither of you says thank you. That word is too small now. Together, you catalogue. And here's your fringe fact. In some regions of the empire, women created private sultanates of their own. Networks of households and trade routes that functioned like soft kingdoms, complete with rules, rights, and oral records. These didn't challenge the empire directly. Instead, they operated beneath it, subverting and sustaining at the same time. They were invisible only to those who weren't paying attention. Later that night, you write your final entry in the ledger you've been carrying for years. They will say we vanished. They will say we were lost. But we were never lost. We were always guiding. You don't sign it. Instead, you leave a mark, 3 dots in the shape of a tulip stem. Then you seal the ledger and place it on the shelf between notes from the baths and songs for the girl who stole the knife. Before you leave, the archivist hands you a bundle. Inside, a new scarf, red, edged in silver thread. A symbol of rank, maybe, or maybe just a welcome. When you emerge from the cellar, it's raining. The girl who gave you the peach is waiting, arms crossed, unimpressed. "You're slower than I thought," she says. You blink. "Excuse me?" "I've been following your trail for months," she says. "Your laundry code is outdated. And that poem about the goat? Lazy metaphor." You laugh. "And what would you do differently?" She lifts her chin. "I've already done it." She She presses something into your hand, a folded cloth, stiff with dried ink. You unfold it slowly. It's a guide. Not yours, hers. And it's good. Better than yours in some places. You nod, proud and stunned. Then you say the only thing that matters now. Keep going. Here's your scholarly debate. Can history be circular? Can a forgotten woman in a distant empire become a guide for a girl centuries later? Some say no, that history is linear, objective, dead. But others insist it's alive, that it moves in spirals, not lines, that it repeats, not because we forget, but because we remember and choose differently. As you walk away from the mountain town, scarf around your neck, new guide in your pocket, you understand something better for the first time. You were never just escaping, you were laying a path, and now others walk it. Not in fear, but in firelight. So here we are, at the quiet edge of the journey, the kind of place where stories begin to echo instead of end. You've travelled across empires, over hills and beneath arches, through hammams and libraries and fig orchards. You've slipped notes through latticework, braided code into your hair, and folded entire survival guides into the hem of a skirt. You've watched women disappear from records and reappear in whispers. You've seen how love, real love, not just longing, can survive through secrecy, and even thrive when wrapped in silk and shadow. What began as a story about forbidden affairs in the Ottoman Empire became something much more. A love story, yes, but not only between two people. It became a love story between women and freedom, between truth and metaphor, between generations who never knew each other's names, yet left behind instructions each time so the next wouldn't have to start from zero. It became about the living archive that hides in a song, a proverb, a dish shared between strangers who suddenly aren't. So if you're lying in bed right now with your phone screen dimmed, or your fan humming soft against the walls, if the world outside feels louder than usual or heavier, just remember, history isn't always made with trumpets or treaties. Sometimes it's made with a single tulip stitched into a scarf, with a quiet woman in the mountains who decided not to burn her past, but to pass it along in a better shape. The story doesn't end here. It never did. It just passes to the next hand, maybe yours, or maybe hers, maybe someone you haven't met yet. So close your eyes,
Let the trail wind forward in your dreams.
because someone, somewhere is already reading the next verse.